Chapter 14-15. Chu Qingyan's ruthless words made Xiao Ran's face turn white. "Qingyan, I'm really doing this for your own good." He couldn't refute. Chu Qingyan laughed softly. "Is that so? But aren't you already engaged? Is this what you mean by doing this for my own good? If you can't treat people wholeheartedly, how can you make me believe that you're doing this for my own good?" Hearing this, Xiao Ran became very agitated. "Qingyan, don't misunderstand. I'm marrying the Jing family purely because I need someone to support me in court. That way, I can have a foothold in court and it'll be easier for me to do things in the future. I don't have any feelings for Jing Mingzhu. If you're not happy, I won't pay attention to her in the future. Although she has the position of official consort and enjoys the glory, I still only have you in my heart. Imperial Consort Mother said that I can't take you as an official consort, but don't worry, I will persuade Imperial Consort Mother and make her let go. At least, I will fight for the position of secondary consort for you. I won't let you suffer any grievances. Qingyan, I know that you're considerate and reasonable. You'll definitely understand me. I was forced by the situation, so I'll make it up to you in the future." Saying this, Xiao Ran's mind suddenly flashed with a thought. His eyes burned as he looked at her. "Qingyan, are you jealous?" Saying this, he was very happy and immediately said, "Don't worry, I only have you in my heart." "Enough!" Chu Qingyan shouted angrily, stopping him from continuing to spout nonsense. She used to think that he was only making mistakes because he was too stubborn about his feelings for her. Now that she heard what he was saying, she could only feel a chill in her heart. She looked at him faintly and pursed her lips. "Xiao Ran, you keep saying that you're doing this for my own good, but you're just too selfish. You're just doing these things in the name of being good to me. That's why you're doing these despicable things with a clear conscience. In reality, it's all for yourself." Xiao Ran became anxious when he heard this. "Qing, you've misunderstood me. I'm really treating you with sincerity." "Is that so? Do you know what I really want?" Chu Qingyan stared at him and didn't give him a chance to think. She continued coldly, "No, I don't know. What I hate the most is men having multiple wives and concubines. They eat from the bowl and look at the pot. They treat women as accessories, a stepping stone and a helping hand." Xiao Ran opened his eyes wide and retorted, "Since ancient times, which man didn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines? Besides, I've already explained that I'm engaged to Jing Mingzhu not because we love each other, but for the sake of the bigger picture. I'm sure she's well aware of this." Chu Qingyan looked at him quietly and finally sighed. "Xiao Ran, do you know the difference between you and your imperial brother? You don't understand what I want, but your brother does, so he understands me. I want to be with him forever, and only he can give me that. Do you understand? You're already engaged, so don't think about anything else. Treat the person who'll be with you hand in hand for the rest of your life. No matter what the purpose of your union is, politics is politics, marriage is marriage. A girl is also a human being, not an object that can be sacrificed on the chessboard as you men wish." Xiao Ran opened his eyes wide and looked at her blankly. He didn't know what to say at this moment, because the words she said were both unfamiliar and fresh to him. However, he was even more frightened by the coldness in her words. At this moment, the sound of horse hooves could be heard. Xiao Ran subconsciously raised his head and saw the figure approaching. He was dressed in silver battle robes that fluttered in the wind. He was as cold as ice, making people not dare to look at him directly. Some people were just like this. They were born with a kind of aura that made people feel intimidated. Xiao Su was an outstanding talent. The soldiers and horses approached and the 2 armies faced each other. Xiao Su came to his little fellow's side. He didn't greet Xiao Ran first, but asked her in a low voice, "Are you tired? Do you want to rest for a while?" "Please, my muscles and bones haven't loosened yet. Don't be in a hurry to send me off." "All right, I won't disturb you 2 brothers from catching up. I'll take care of the people for you first." Chu Qingyan winked at him and smiled mischievously. "All right, let's go to the east," Xiao Su said with a faint smile. "East?" Chu Qingyan's eyes lit up. The big ice cube wouldn't give her a direction for no reason. She immediately led her herd of beasts to the east. "Qingyan, Seeing her leave without looking back after hearing his call, Xiao Ran felt as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over his head, chilling him to the bone. He had been provoked by the two of them standing side by side, and now that she was ignoring him, he couldn't help trembling in anger. Chu Qingyan really didn't want to pay attention to him anymore. She had already said what she needed to say. If he continued to be so stubborn, he would only have himself to blame. Meeting each other was a kind of fate, but not every friend that met and knew each other would be able to walk together to the end. It could only be said that they were not fated to be together. She gave a light sigh and then quickly calmed her emotions. Her finger made a gesture and the herd of beasts quickly charged towards the east. Xiao Ran took back his gaze from Chu Qingyan and turned to look coldly at the person in front of him. His eldest brother, the person he had respected since he was young and the person who taught him how to conduct himself, was sometimes more like a father than his imperial father. But many things had changed, including his feelings for him. But towards his eldest brother, he still felt a trace of apology in his heart. Eldest brother, I really like Qingyan. I've let you down, but I don't regret it. He straightened his neck and seriously said this. Xiao Su lightly glanced at him. Don't call me imperial brother anymore, I can't afford to be called that. Xiao Ran was stunned. It was like something had snapped in that moment. His heart slowly tightened, as if something had disappeared and would never appear again. And at this time, there was a sound coming from the east. Xiao Ran immediately turned his head to look, and a group of people quickly appeared in his field of vision. The person in the lead was Fong Lu. He had seen him before. He was stunned at first and then his face filled with anger. Didn't he go to escort the provisions? Why would he appear here? You can do it secretly, so can this king. Xiao Su lightly said again. Xiao Ran looked at him in disbelief. Everything that had happened today had exceeded his expectations step by step. Fong Lu and the others had indeed gone to escort the provisions, but they had already returned. It was just that Xiao Su had been extra careful and had left them outside. Firstly, it was to protect the provisions, and secondly, it was to leave a backup plan. Looking at Lai Jun, who had met up with the little fellow, Xiao Su's lips curled slightly. A smile flashed through his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He once again looked at the person in front of him. Xiao Ran, your plan this time has actually succeeded, but you were too impatient. Originally, you should have trapped us for a few days, waiting for us to be exhausted and hungry before you acted. Perhaps you would have had a chance of victory, but the unfinished words were self-evident. Chapter 14:16. It's a pity that you. As soon as Xiao Su finished speaking, Xiao Ran's expression changed. It was as if he had been seen through. His face turned red as he shouted, "Shut up! Even if I miscalculated, it's not certain who will win in the end. Don't be complacent too early." As soon as Xiao Ran finished speaking, he reacted. His face turned red and he didn't dare to look at the person in front of him. He had never thought that there would be a day when he would be so rude to his eldest brother, even glaring at him. For a moment, he didn't know what to do, but he hated this feeling in his heart. Xiao Ran's extreme reaction fell into Xiao Su's eyes, but it only caused a small ripple. He sighed softly in his heart, as if something was slowly drifting away with the wind. Since it's like this, then show me your true ability. Xiao Su didn't waste any more words. He pulled out the sword at his waist and pointed it at the moon, his eyes cold. Xiao Ran turned his head and met those cold black eyes. They didn't have the intimacy from before, only alienation and indifference. It was as if there were thousands of rivers and mountains between them, and that sword was shining with a silver light, piercing his eyes. He suddenly felt that there were many things that couldn't go back. Your Highness, you mustn't be impulsive. The general beside him saw his absent-minded expression and was afraid that he would be swayed by his emotions after listening to Xiao Su's words. Xiao Ran came back to his senses. Seeing that the people around him didn't agree with him fighting with his eldest brother, he felt uncomfortable. They also thought that he was inferior to his eldest brother like Qingyan. Eldest brother was the Sichuan god of war, but he wasn't bad either. He just didn't have a chance to show it. He clenched his teeth and pulled out his sword. Ignoring everyone's dissuasion, he squeezed the horse's belly with his legs. 1 man and 1 horse left the army and came to Xiao Su. I accept the challenge. He sat on the horse with his head held high and his chest out, looking confident. Xiao Su looked at him indifferently. Let's begin. Xiao Su's cold demeanor made it seem as if he didn't put him in his eyes at all. He couldn't help but purse his lips. His fingers tightened around the hilt of his sword as he urged his warhorse to charge at Xiao Su. When the tip of the sword reached an inch in front of Xiao Su, it was blocked by his sword. Xiao Ran snorted, but he didn't dare to underestimate his opponent. His hand drew a sword and attacked again. Xiao Su's long sword blocked his attack again. His posture was calm and unhurried, as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. After several exchanges, Xiao Ran's attacks were fierce, but they were all countered by Xiao Su. Xiao Ran couldn't help but feel anxious. In the distance, Chu Qingyan was commanding a herd of beasts to surround a group of soldiers. Su Yi followed beside her and glanced at the people fighting in front of them. He couldn't help but ask, Master, His Highness and the 4th Prince are fighting. Do you want to go over and take a look? Leave this place to this subordinate to handle. Chu Qingyan heard this and turned to look at the 2 people who were locked in a fierce battle. She smiled lightly and her voice carried a trace of amusement. No need. Then she looked away and focused her attention on the enemy in front of her. Xiao Ran was not the big ice block's opponent. Hearing Master say this, a trace of surprise appeared in Su Yi's eyes. Was Master too confident in His Highness, or too confident? But he couldn't help but admit that in their eyes, His Highness was a valiant and omnipotent existence. As if to verify his thoughts, a cry of surprise came from afar. Then, he saw Xiao Ran fall from the back of the horse and smash heavily on the ground. The dust on the ground splashed up, and he was in a very sorry state. Xiao Ran supported himself with both hands on the ground. The gravel scraped against his palms, like a blunt knife grinding against his flesh. It was slightly painful. However, his gaze was fixed on the long sword that had been flung away. He couldn't believe that he hadn't even exchanged 20 moves with his brother. Shame covered his heart. At this time, when the generals rushed over to help others, a sharp sword was placed in front of him, making him unable to move. He looked up in a daze and saw a pair of calm eyes looking down at him. Xiao Ran, you still have a long way to go. Whether it's fighting for the little fellow or fighting for power with me, you still have a long way to go. Xiao Su's indifferent words pierced the inferiority in Xiao Ran's heart. His hands were tightly clasped to the ground and he stared at him with red eyes. Xiao Su, don't be too self-righteous. No matter how high your martial arts are, you are only one person. When 2 armies fight, it's a competition of who is better at scheming. Sooner or later, there will be a day when I surpass you. Xiao Su didn't pay attention to his words. Looking at him, his eyes were indifferent. Your martial arts were taught by me. I know all of your weaknesses, not to mention your so-called army formation. If I wanted to defeat you, it would be as easy as turning my hand. Xiao Ran's face turned white. Do you know why you could last 20 moves with me before? Xiao Su looked at him, as if he was looking at his younger brother through him. Because you're my younger brother. So as the older brother, how could he be so heavy-handed? Xiao Ran's eyes widened as he stared at him in disbelief. Could it be that he had been letting him win in the past? There was no doubt about the answer. Otherwise, when he fought with his imperial brother today, he wouldn't have been so helpless. Xiao Su continued, just now, you said that the key to a battle between 2 armies is the commander's army formation. I admit that, but... He paused and put away his sword. His gaze became lazy as he chuckled. Do you think you still have a chance to turn things around? As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Ran's general's expression changed. Looking around, he found that they had lost nearly half of their men. The rest were too frightened by the ferocity of the beast horde to make a move. In short, it could be said that they had already lost. Xiao Ran also found his situation at this time. Other than the direction he came from, the other 3 directions had already been occupied by Xiao Su's people. Moreover, they were still eyeing them covetously. Just by fighting with Xiao Su for a short while, his men had already suffered heavy losses. Your Highness, we have to retreat quickly. The general on the side said anxiously. No, we have to fight it out with them. Xiao Ran stood up and grabbed the sword that his subordinate had picked up. Although he wasn't confident, he couldn't lose face. He couldn't be a person who ran away at the last minute. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the face to see Qingyan in the future. Your Highness, if we delay any longer, I'm afraid we will be surrounded from all sides. At that time, it will be difficult to escape. That's right, Your Highness. Where there is life, there is hope. Let's go back and plan well. We will definitely find the best way. After listening to everyone's advice, Xiao Ran's heart relaxed. He couldn't die. If he died, he wouldn't be able to see Qingyan again. A man should know when to yield and when to stand tall. He nodded with a cold face. Go, charge out from the back. At this time, a group of people appeared between Xiao Su and Xiao Ran, blocking Xiao Su and the others. Xiao Ran took the opportunity to escape with his men. Because of these people, Turin and the others didn't have time to care about Xiao Ran. They could only watch as they ran farther and farther away. Master, are we still going to chase? Turin asked. Don't chase a cornered enemy. Xiao Su only said these 4 words. At the same time, Hong Jianhua rode a horse with a panicked face. Lord, something happened. Chapter 14:17. What happened? Xiao Su frowned and looked at him. He had already warned him before, and now he was panicking like this again. He was afraid that something big had happened. At this time, Chu Qingyan had also gathered with her people. She happened to hear Hong Jianhua's call and immediately quickened her steps to Big Ice Cube's side. She also looked at him in confusion. Hong Jianhua was so flustered that he couldn't even form a sentence. He could only use his actions to show them. Following the direction that Hong Jianhua was pointing at, everyone was shocked to find that the forest they were in before had become a volcano, and the mountains in the distance were also affected. One mountain was connected to another, and the fire spread from one mountain to another. Coupled with the mountain wind, it looked like a fire dragon from afar. This was the literal meaning of fanning the flames. This is too scary. Chu Qingyan was so scared that she stuttered. Previously, she was only focused on dealing with the enemy and didn't notice that the fire had become so serious. She was afraid that if they didn't extinguish it, it wouldn't only affect the creatures inside, but also the surrounding towns. General Hong, General Jing, Turin Fuolin, quickly lead the troops to put out the fire. Xiao Su's expression changed slightly when he saw the mountain that was spitting out tongues of fire. If he remembered correctly, there were several villages there. If they didn't stop it, the hundreds and thousands of lives would be swallowed up. Yes. At this critical moment, everyone had forgotten to deal with Xiao Ran and the others. They only had eyes and hearts to put out the fire. The people around him were taken away one by one. In the end, only Chu Qingyan was left by Xiao Su's side. What about me? I'll go put out the fire too. Chu Qingyan pointed at herself. She thought that they had forgotten about her and immediately volunteered to lead the troops. However, just as she was about to move, she was stopped by the people beside her. Xiao Su looked at her helplessly. It doesn't matter whether you're there or not. But if you're not there, no one can control these things. Chu Qingyan, who was originally a little depressed because Big Ice Cube didn't let her go, heard his angry and funny words, and couldn't help but follow his gaze. She saw Xiaohai leading the eagle formation and Bai Yutong leading the herd of beasts fighting for territory. Perhaps it was because the enemy had already dealt with everything that needed to be dealt with, and there was nothing for them to do. That was why they were looking for something to do. Chu Qingyan saw Little C use its wings to pat Bai Yutong's head, indicating that it should take the group of beasts away. Its group of eagles had no place to rest, and Bai Yutong was unwilling to be left behind, so it swung its claws at Little C. Chu Qingyan finally understood why Big Ice Cube had such an expression. This group of idiots really didn't stop for a single day. She went forward with a dark face, and spent a lot of effort to mediate between the two sides. In the end, both sides arrogantly led their people away from the empty space, and then each took a side, ignoring the other. Chu Qingyan looked at the empty space that had been fighting endlessly before, and couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She really didn't understand the world of idiots. Big Ice Cube, they clearly look quite smart, but why are they so childish when they quarrel? Chu Qingyan walked to his side, and couldn't help but complain. Xiao Su chuckled softly when he heard that. If we calculate according to the age of humans, they're at most 10 years old. What can you argue with a 10-year-old child? Chu Qingyan slapped her head. I almost forgot, they're still considered young among animals. Perhaps it was because these few had started to grow crazily after they came to her side. Now that she looked at them, they were huge beasts. She couldn't help but laugh, then looked up at him. Big Ice Cube, are you feeling better? Fighting with your own hands and feet, you must be in a bad mood, right? No matter how much she hated him, or how impatient she was with him, she had invested over 10 years of feelings into him. It wasn't something that could be taken back so easily. The faint smile in his eyes deepened because of her words, and he reached his hand out to her. Chu Qingyan didn't understand, but she still reached her hand out to give it to him. When she held his hand, he immediately tightened his grip, and she heard him say, I'm happy with you. When she heard this, it was as sweet as honey. But before she could react, his arm exerted force, and her entire body was lifted off the back of the spotted tiger, and then she sat on the back of his horse. Hey, this isn't good. She reacted, and her face immediately turned red. What are you afraid of? Everyone knows that you're my wife. If anyone is unhappy, let them find another one. Xiao Su snorted disapprovingly. Chu Qingyan's face turned red when she heard the Big Ice Cube's words. Instead of feeling embarrassed, he was proud of it. If Hua Ling and the others heard this, they would feel like their mouths were stuffed with dog food. When Xiao Ran returned to the camp, he was told that only half of his 100,000 troops were left. He was so angry that he smashed everything he could, and in the end, he could only sit down in a chair. At this time, what entered his eyes was his torn battle clothes. Before leaving the capital, his lady mother had specially told him to wear it. She said it was indestructible and invulnerable, but now it was easily torn by his royal brother. He felt that he was just like the battle clothes he was wearing. It was simply a joke. Your Highness, what should we do next? 50,000 troops against the King of England's 100,000 troops is simply throwing an egg at a rock. Adding in his herd of beasts, our people won't have any advantages at all. If we don't handle it well, we might be completely wiped out. A general was worried and half afraid as he analyzed the situation. When these words fell, everyone's eyes fell on Xiao Ran. These eyes were asking for help, respectful, but there were also doubts and distrust. Xiao Ran was very clear that some of these people didn't belong to his faction. He knew a long time ago that they didn't trust his ability. Now that he had slapped himself in the face, he couldn't blame them for doubting his ability. If he wanted to restore his image, he had to defeat the eldest brother's people in the next battle. But even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice, let alone a confrontation between manpower and manpower. He knew that if he fought with the eldest brother, they would be convinced, but he didn't have the ability and energy to do so right now. I'll ask my royal father to give us more troops. I'm not afraid of the disparity in manpower. Xiao Ran squeezed this sentence out from the crack in the door. Everyone nodded. This was the only way. After discussing with everyone, Xiao Ran wrote a letter, put it in an envelope, and let someone take it back. However, these 2 days, Xiao Ran was very anxious, but there was no movement outside at all. However, at this moment, Yan Shi walked in with a letter in his hand. Your Highness, your letter is from the capital. Xiao Ran's eyes lit up. Could it be that his royal father had replied? Just as Xiao Ran excitedly opened the letter and browsed through it, his face turned pale little by little. Lord, what's wrong with you? Yan Shi was so scared that his legs trembled. Xiao Ran took a deep breath, but still felt uncomfortable in his chest. Nansong Kingdom, Junlan Kingdom, and Lulan Kingdom have formed an alliance. Now they plan to use their iron hooves to trample over our country and nibble away our Sichuan. At the same time, Xiao Su had just received a letter from Xiao Ho in the capital. Chapter 14:18. After Xiao Su finished reading the letter, his expression was subtle. Chu Qingyan, who had just entered, saw this scene and couldn't help but lean over. What happened now? Xiao Su directly handed the letter to her. Take a look. Seeing him like this, something terrible must have happened. Chu Qingyan didn't say anything and took the letter. She read 10 lines at a time and carefully read it. The more she read, the more interesting her expression became. In the end, she couldn't help but laugh. Even the heavens aren't helping them. Xiao Ho said in the letter that Nansong had persuaded Junlan and Lulan to send troops to Sichuan. Because the 3 countries were in 3 different places in Sichuan, they formed a 3-sided siege. It was fine if it was 1-on-1, but if it was 1 against 3, no matter how strong Sichuan's military was, they couldn't care less about the other side. Now, Sichuan Emperor was in a terrible fix. Xiao Su didn't comment. Now that they have internal and external troubles, even if they have 3 heads and 6 arms, they can't take care of everything. As long as one side falls, only destruction awaits them. Chu Qingyan analyzed objectively. Xiao Su nodded. Attend to one thing and lose sight of the other. Chu Qingyan agreed. Then she thought of something. Big ice block, Sichuan's current strength is enough to deal with the 3 countries. Do they have a chance of winning? Xiao Su laughed lightly. Although Nansong suffered heavy losses last time, they still have hundreds of thousands of troops. Junlan's national strength isn't great, but it's more than enough to send out 200,000 troops. But Lulan, he paused, his tone uncertain. This country is very mysterious. They don't have much contact with the surrounding countries. It's also an area that Shaolai cavalry doesn't know. However, I heard that they're good at using goo poison. Although the country doesn't occupy a large area, it's not a country to be underestimated. Sichuan, apart from Li Weiyuan's 200,000, Xiao Rant's only 50,000, plus the Imperial Guards and troops from other places, doesn't exceed 400,000. However, before Xiao Su could finish his sentence, Chu Qingyan continued. Theoretically speaking, with so many soldiers, they wouldn't have the time to deal with the encirclement of the 3 nations. That's because it's impossible to transfer all these soldiers to the front lines at once. Furthermore, the enemy's attack was sudden, and every nation sent their best soldiers. Perhaps Xixian had already started to panic. No matter which side they went to support, they wouldn't have enough soldiers. At most, they could only delay the enemy's attack, but they wouldn't be able to stop it. In the end, they would all be nibbled away by the enemy. How do I know how he'll deal with the enemy? She snorted and asked. Her dislike of Sichuan Emperor had already risen to the level of loathing. How could such a narrow-minded and selfish person be worthy of being the ruler of a country? Whenever she thought of his battered appearance, she felt her mood lighten up. Xiao Su bent his finger and knocked her on the head. When she covered her head and glared at him, he withdrew his hand. His expression changed from relaxed to serious. If it weren't for the internal strife, the 3 countries of Nansong wouldn't have taken advantage of the situation to invade. However, the emperor can only blame himself for this. It's just that when the nest is overturned, there are no intact eggs. If Xixian falls, the people won't be able to live in peace. Chu Qingyan stared blankly. She had only been thinking about the Sichuan emperor's enmity, but had forgotten to consider the price behind it. Her expression also became serious. Xiao Su saw her tense expression, and the seriousness from before immediately dissipated. His eyes revealed a faint smile. It won't come to that. Chu Qingyan didn't understand what he meant for a while. She looked at him blankly. Xiao Su smiled and reached out to stroke her head. His movements were doting. Don't be afraid. I'll protect you. She felt the image of a big ice cube suddenly grow, but she still said seriously, you don't have to be afraid. I have Xiao Hai and the others. I'll also protect you. Xiao Su's eyes were filled with warmth. In the past, when he was alone, no one had ever said such words to him. Because everyone thought that he was strong enough and invincible, everyone sought his protection. But very few people asked him if he was tired or if he needed a shoulder. But now, this delicate little girl in front of him was standing on her tiptoes, trying her best to hold up the sky with her hands. He wasn't a cold-hearted person, so how could he not be moved? His fingers slid down her soft black hair to her cheeks. Her smooth skin was as smooth and warm as jade, making him unable to let go. He softly said, "As a 9-feet-tall man, how can I let my wife be in danger? As long as I'm here, I won't let anyone hurt you." These words made her very happy, but she couldn't help but ask, "Then what if you're not here?" Seeing through her thoughts, he chuckled. The movements of his fingers became even gentler. "Even if I'm not here, I'll still arrange for your future." When she heard this, she immediately slapped away his hands that were constantly taking advantage of her. She harumphed. "Who cares about the future? If you dare to abandon me, I'll make trouble for you until your next life, and the one after that, you won't be able to live in peace." Xiao Su smiled and pulled her into his embrace. He lowered his head and lightly kissed her pink lips. "All right, you won't be able to live in peace." Hearing the teasing tone in his words, she straightened her neck and decided to ignore him for 2 hours. But how could Xiao Su let her do that? He caressed her back and said, "Let me test you. What do you think Xiao Ran will do?" Chu Qingyan's mind began to work quickly. In an instant, she forgot about the decision she made. "I'm guessing that he'll leave a portion of his people to restrain us, and then bring the rest to the front lines?" As she said this, she raised her head to look at him. But when she saw his smile that wasn't a smile, she became less and less confident. "He won't do that because he knows that these people won't be able to restrain me. In the end, he'll just raise a tiger and cause trouble. He's worried that he won't be able to deal with the Allied forces, and I'll become the biggest threat instead. After all, Southern Blue and the others are attacking from the outside, while I'll attack from the inside and destroy them from the inside." "Then what do you mean?" She was a little confused. "He'll ask for a ceasefire." Xiao Su lightly tugged his lips into a cold smile. He was his disciple, and there was probably no one who understood him better than him. Sure enough, that afternoon, Xiao Su received a ceasefire agreement from Xiao Ran. Chu Qingyan looked at the person in front of her with starry eyes. "Big ice block, you're practically a god with foresight." Xiao Su chuckled. "It's not that I'm smart, but that this is the only path in front of him. He has no choice but to choose it. However, there should be another way." But Xiao Ran's skin wasn't that thick. "But the one in the capital might be different." "Then what do you think? Do you accept it or take the opportunity to take them down?" Chu Qingyan blinked and licked her lips like a mischievous spirit. This "them" wasn't referring to Xiao Ran's army, but the people in the capital. Chapter 1419. The atmosphere was originally very solemn, but Xiao Su didn't know whether to laugh or cry at her childish and excited expression. He tapped his fingers on the table and looked at the dirty subordinates standing below. His eyes narrowed and he revealed a fox-like smile. "Of course it's to accept. The army works day and night to put out the fire. How can they have the energy to fight now?" Chu Qingyan and the others were puzzled. This reason seemed to be very far-fetched. However, Xiao Su's words were full of treachery, and everyone couldn't help but shiver. Usually, when the Lord revealed such an expression, it meant that someone was going to be unlucky. They immediately put down their worries and echoed, "Yes, what we need most now is to recover our energy. Even the Heavenly King can't control us." Xiao Su was satisfied with everyone's reaction. He waved his hand and let them rest. After all, they had been fighting the fire for a few days and their physical strength had reached its limit. After everyone left, Chu Qingyan strolled in front of him and placed her hands on his table. She stared at him suspiciously, as if she wanted to see a flower on his face. Xiao Su allowed her to size him up but didn't say anything. Finally, she couldn't hold it in and tapped the table with her fingers. She took the initiative to ask, "Big ice block, what are you planning?" Xiao Su raised his brows. "Nothing much. Everyone is tired and should rest well." As he spoke, he touched his chin and praised himself. "Don't you think I'm a general who empathizes with his subordinates?" Chu Qingyan snorted, looking like she didn't believe him. Xiao Su broke his facade and couldn't hide the smile in his eyes. "I'm just teasing you. I have my own plans." Hearing him say this, her guess was confirmed. She breathed a sigh of relief in her heart and a smile appeared on her face. Although she had a grudge against the Sichuan emperor, the people were innocent. She also didn't want to see the Sichuan kingdom turn into a river of blood. This was the place where the big ice block grew up. She didn't want it to disappear. Moreover, after the big ice block met up with the army, he didn't leave but stayed here to wait for Xiao Ran. This was because this was a battlefield. No matter how fierce the battle was, it wouldn't hurt the people. So even if the Sichuan emperor did so many heinous things, the big ice block still cared for the people. The big ice block who cared about the world and was merciful. She felt that he wasn't worth it. But wasn't this also his personal charm? She was attracted to him to be this character. Seeing that she was distracted, Xiao Su thought that she was worried about him again. He couldn't help but add, "Don't worry. I won't forget what they did to you and me. This time, I'll teach them a thorough lesson." Chu Qingyan came back to her senses. Her eyes lit up. It seemed that he was preparing a big move. She knew that he wouldn't tell her even if she asked, so she didn't pester him. Anyway, he and Xiao Ho were already working together. Both of them were shrewd foxes. They wouldn't lose out no matter what. In the distance, Xiao Ho suddenly sneezed. He touched his nose and was a little confused. Who was talking behind his back? When Xiao Ran received Xiao Su's reply, although he had achieved his goal, he didn't know why he felt very conflicted. Originally, they were on opposite sides. They should have fought to the death. However, now that the enemy was invading, he wanted to take the initiative to ask for peace. Clearly, he had challenged him before, but now he was lowering himself to negotiate with him. He really wanted to laugh out loud. Even the heavens were on his imperial brother's side. How sullen! But what could he do? He couldn't just watch the enemy country tear their country apart and swallow it up. Xiao Ran crumpled the letter in his hand into a ball and slammed it on the table. There was nowhere to vent the anger in his heart. He had to suffer but couldn't say anything. Yan Shi saw him like this and felt very uncomfortable in his heart. After all, he had watched this man plan all the way. As long as the reinforcements arrived, the King of England and the others wouldn't be a threat at all. However, such a thing happened at the crucial moment. Now, he could only lower himself to negotiate with the other party. No man with courage could swallow this. Fortunately, His Royal Highness was a man who endured humiliation and put the overall situation first. Your Royal Highness, although the King of England has agreed, I am worried that he will go back on his word halfway. Yan Shi expressed his worries. These words were echoed by many generals. Realizing that he didn't control his emotions well and lost his composure in front of his subordinates, Xiao Ran immediately restrained his expression. He coughed softly and replied, "You don't have to worry about this. My brother is a man of his word. Since he has promised, he will fulfill it. Moreover, he has the people in his heart. After all, this is the country he has protected for more than 10 years. No one knew his brother better than him. Although it was rumored that his brother was cold-blooded and ruthless, if he was really ruthless, then no one in the world would be affectionate and righteous. Since he was a child, he had seen him carry the responsibility and move forward with difficulty, wholeheartedly for this country." Hearing this, someone stood up and said excitedly, "Can your Royal Highness persuade the King of England to put aside his grudges for the time being and fight the enemy with us?" Xiao Ran heard this and a bitter smile appeared on his face. It's already his limit that he doesn't intervene. If you want him to help, he didn't continue but sighed and shook his head. Just as he understood that his brother was affectionate and righteous, he also understood that his eldest brother might never do anything for the Sichuan royal family in the future. And he didn't have the face to ask him to help when the two sides fell out. Even if he went, he would only be humiliating himself. Moreover, his pride didn't allow him to bow down to him. From the moment he walked out of the capital, there was a barrier between him and his brother that couldn't be crossed. Seeing that the others still wanted to say something, Xiao Ran's face suddenly darkened. "Don't think about this anymore. We will break camp in an hour. If there are any more objections, you will be dealt with according to military law." As soon as these words came out, everyone immediately fell silent and quickly left. When there was no one else, Xiao Ran pursed his lips and flipped the entire table. The floor was in a mess. He held a breath in his heart. There was bitterness and resentment that he couldn't express. When the news came that Xiao Ran was leaving with the soldiers, Chu Qingyan was standing at the foot of the mountain with her big ice cube to watch the soldiers clean up the mountain. Occasionally, she would see people carrying roasted birds and beasts out with smiles. Because the fire had come too suddenly and too fiercely, many of the animals had been swallowed by the fire before they could react. In the past 2 days, the soldiers had found them when they were putting out the fire. Chu Qingyan had suggested to Xiao Su when she learned of this. Xiao Su waved his hand and had them go into the mountain to pick them up and give them to the kitchen as a reward for putting out the fire. This made everyone's spirits rise and they worshipped Chu Qingyan even more. They had a realization that there was meat to eat if they followed Wang Fei. He's a person who knows what's important and what's not, Xiao Su said faintly. Knowing who he was talking about, Chu Qingyan sighed. It's just that his character isn't good. Wanting to take his brother's wife, how good could his character be? If it wasn't for their past friendship, she probably would have felt disgust at even looking at him. She really was blind at the time to be friends with him. Her heart was very bitter. Suddenly, she felt her hand warm. She raised her head to look at the person beside her. She saw him hold her hand even tighter. His eyes were full of pity as he said, "Don't deny the past. At least from the beginning, he really thought of you as a friend." Chu Qingyan stilled. In the end, the corners of her mouth slowly turned up as she nodded heavily. N. When Xiao Ho received the reply, he was first in disbelief. Then he put down the letter and smiled as he shook his head and said to Lin Jiangdong in front of him, "Imperial brother is too sly." Chapter 1420. After Lin Jiangdong received the approval, he took the letter and looked at it. His reaction was even more exaggerated than his master's. This, Jiangdong, aren't you glad that you didn't go against eldest brother again? Seeing his subordinate's reaction, Xiao Ho chuckled. He was in a very good mood. Yes, it seems that His Royal Highness was merciful back then. Lin Jiangdong trembled and twitched the corner of his mouth. He was still in a state of shock. Xiao Ho laughed, then rested his face on one hand and gloated, "It can only be said that Imperial Father and the others stepped on Imperial Brother's bottom line this time." Lin Jiangdong deeply agreed and rejoiced, "I'm very grateful that His Royal Highness didn't kill me back then." Feeling that Lord's mood was not as gloomy as before, Lin Jiangdong joked to make Lord feel better. As expected, Xiao Ho looked at him with smiling eyes. "Has this prince treated you too well recently? You actually dare to tease this prince's imperial brother?" There was no blame in his words, only a joke. Lin Jiangdong said with a smile, "This one was rude. When His Royal Highness returns, this one will definitely take the initiative to apologize. You'll believe it even if I say it." Xiao Ho laughed and shook his head. He murmured softly, "I wonder when he will return?" Although his voice was low, Lin Jiangdong still heard it in the quiet room. He thought for a moment and comforted, "Lord, don't be impatient. If His Royal Highness plan succeeds, it won't be long before His Royal Highness can return in triumph and reunite with Lord." Reunite? He repeated these 2 words in a daze. It was as if strength suddenly poured into his body from the soles of his feet and filled his body. He came back to his senses and realized that he was looking forward to Imperial Brother's return. According to His Royal Highness letter, he will return to the capital, and with such a well-planned plan, as long as nothing unexpected happens, your revenge will be just around the corner. Xiao Ho curled his lips slightly and rubbed his chin. "You're right. Then do as Imperial Brother said in the letter. There must be no mistakes, especially those in the palace. They are not easy to deal with. Tell your subordinates to be careful and efficient. If they are discovered, then it will not be as simple as wasting all your previous efforts. If he failed, then the crime would be huge. He might even be charged with treason. This matter was of great importance." Lin Jiangdong immediately nodded and promised, "This one will definitely not disappoint the Lord." Xiao Ho nodded and gave a few more instructions. Lin Jiangdong agreed to them one by one. Before he left, he confirmed, "Does the Lord have any other instructions?" Hearing this, Xiao Ho subconsciously wanted to wave his hand, but just as he raised his hand, he paused. He thought carefully for a while, then took the green jade pendant hanging from his waist and said with a smile, "Give this jade pendant to Lin Meng and tell him to listen to the King of England's commands in the future. I believe that he is in need of manpower now." Lin Jiangdong looked at the jade pendant in the Lord's hand in disbelief. This was not an ordinary jade pendant, but a military seal. It was the army that the Lord had cultivated for many years. What did the Lord's action mean? There was no need to guess. It was just that he did not expect the Lord to give it to the King of England so generously. It was not until he heard a light cough that he hurriedly reached out with both hands to take it. "The Lord, this is the force that you have cultivated for many years." Hearing Lin Jiangdong's careful probing, Xiao Ho smiled indifferently. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. A good sword should be used on the blade. Now is a good time. Lin Jiangdong thought about it and agreed, but he hesitated. "Your Highness, aren't you worried that you can't get the army back?" Xiao Ho laughed as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. "Jiangdong, not everyone is like my father, burning the bridge after crossing the river and getting rid of the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness. If you can't trust my brother's character, then I don't think there is anyone else in this world who can be trusted." Lin Jiangdong thought about the King of England's actions over the years and couldn't help but nod with an ashamed expression. It is this one who has gauged the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. "It's fine. You are also thinking for me, but," Xiao Ho said, his smile suddenly becoming fainter. "These soldiers, I have given them away and have no intention of getting them back. Perhaps these people will be more useful in his hands." These words shocked Lin Jiangdong even more than before. But no one could change the decision made by the Lord, except for Princess Pang Zhijing. Unfortunately, she was no longer in this world. Lin Jiangdong felt that the Lord was making arrangements for his death. When this thought flashed through his mind, he couldn't help but want to slap himself. He immediately bowed and asked to leave. "This one understands. If the Lord has nothing else, this one will leave." Xiao Ho waved his hand and let him leave. After the door was closed, the sound of footsteps slowly faded away. Xiao Ho gathered his thoughts and his gaze fell on the envelope again. The ink on the yellow cover glowed in the firelight. The handwriting was elegant and flamboyant. The smile at the corner of his mouth deepened. Without the restraints of blood and responsibility, the eldest brother seemed to be living more and more freely. That was his wish in the past. He always thought that after getting his revenge, he could live the way he wanted. Now, he no longer had any thoughts of walking in this world. The only thing that had supported him until now was those grudges. It was good to see someone achieve his original wish for him. So, he had to protect him well. "Imperial brother, when you return, it will be the day when the dust settles." In the Sichuan Imperial Palace. A sharp and crisp sound cut through the silence in the room, but it brought with it an even more deathly atmosphere. The Sichuan Emperor panted. The venting just now had left him somewhat powerless. In just half a month he appeared to be old. He was not like in the past, when he was over 50 years old but vigorous. It was unknown whether it was because he had been tired recently or because he was ill, but he seemed to have aged 10 years. But right now, his eyes were filled with anger. The dragon's might was still there. He glared angrily at the officials in front of him and scolded, "What the hell are you doing? Didn't you already send a large army? Why can't you even defend the city? Previously, the other party attacked suddenly. You said you didn't have time to respond, and I will not pursue the matter. Now that it has happened so long ago, you still want to use the excuse that you didn't have time to prepare? Your Majesty, please calm your anger." The officials of the imperial court knelt in front of the table. The case of Prime Minister Liang and Prime Minister Fu had implicated many officials. Now, many of them had been promoted directly from assistant ministers. The teacup that the Sichuan emperor had thrown earlier shattered on the ground. Some of the officials' robes were stained with tea leaves, while others were splashed with boiling tea. But no one dared to move an inch. "Your Majesty, the Southern Song nation came prepared. They came in a menacing manner, and all of them were elites. Before General Li's men arrived, the Southern Song army had already broken through the city. Although the soldiers sent by the Junlan nation weren't as elite as the Southern Song nation, they outnumbered the Southern Song nation by nearly double. We simply didn't have enough men. Fine, the Southern Song and the Junlan kingdom are both reasonable. What about the Lulan kingdom? How do you explain that? The Sichuan emperor was so angry that he wanted to smash the table. The Lulan kingdom is simply a terrifying existence. The Minister of War's shoulders trembled as if he was talking about a ghost. He couldn't even speak clearly. Chapter 1421. Speak. Sichuan emperor's anger flared up when he saw his subjects' demeaning expression. The Minister of War was afraid that the Assistant Minister of War would say something wrong and anger the emperor again, so he immediately replied, "Your Majesty, although Lulan doesn't have as many soldiers as the other two countries, their true weapon isn't their people, but their poison. Especially those strange animals they keep around their soldiers. Some are poisonous birds, some are poisonous snakes, and none of them have ever been seen before. As long as they release those animals, our soldiers won't dare to approach them and will be defeated." Sichuan emperor was slightly taken aback. He had ruled the country for so long, but he had never heard of using such a method to fight a war. Moreover, it was from a small country that he had never paid attention to. Sichuan emperor was very unhappy at this moment. He felt like he was being suppressed by a small country. His anger didn't subside. Instead, it rose. No matter what method the other party uses, can't you think of a way? There are many things in the world that have a weakness. I don't believe that they don't have a natural enemy. The ministers looked at each other. They had thought of what His Majesty had said, but they had never seen or heard of those animals. They hadn't even been recorded in books. The Ministry of War had flipped through books for several days and still came up empty-handed. "Your Majesty, this humble subject has something to say, but I'm not sure if it's appropriate." The Minister of Works raised his head. Although his back was straight, his arms by his sides couldn't help but tremble, revealing his current emotions. Usually, this wasn't something pleasant to hear, but the ministers in front of him were shrinking their necks. They didn't have any way to deal with the enemy. Sichuan emperor also lost the mood to reprimand them. He waved his hand casually. "Say what you want to say." The Minister of Works was afraid that he wouldn't have the courage to say it later. After hearing His Majesty's permission, he immediately said, "Your Majesty, we need people now. Can you ask the King of England to come back? He has many strange people under his command. They might be able to deal with the people of Lulan." After speaking, he immediately lowered his head. If he stuck his head out, he would be stabbed. He might as well say it directly. As soon as he said this, the hall instantly fell silent. It was as if they could hear their own breathing. After the Minister of Works finished speaking, the others lowered their heads even more. This was their inner voice, as well as that of the court's officials. It was just that they didn't dare to say it out loud. They were afraid that if they angered the emperor, they would never be able to rise again. Now that someone had spoken for them, they couldn't help but sigh of relief. At the same time, they were afraid of Sichuan emperor's reaction. The Xian emperor's face froze. He didn't expect that someone would speak up for Xiao when he started a rebellion. He couldn't help but be so angry that his lips trembled. However, he knew very well that Li Weiyuan's ability was not as good as his. That child had too little experience in leading troops, so it was inevitable that she would be at a disadvantage. Half of the generals in the court were either involved in the Liang and Fu families' cases or were useless. And this war didn't happen before Xiao started the war. It also didn't happen after he finished dealing with Xiao. At this moment, Sichuan felt as if the heavens wanted him dead. He wanted to vent his anger on the Minister of Works, but when he opened his mouth, he saw a row of expectant gazes. He subconsciously shut his mouth. Now that the three countries were in an alliance, most of the generals in the court had been sent out. Many of the civil officials had been sent to supervise the army. In addition to those who had been imprisoned, there weren't many people left in the court who could be used. If he made trouble again, there would be even fewer people who could do things. Therefore, even though he knew that they were all here to persuade him, he couldn't punish them. For the first time, Sichuan emperor felt powerless. He was the ruler of a country, but he couldn't do as he wished. It was really sullen. All of you are dismissed. Let me think about it. Sichuan Emperor held his forehead, looking as if he didn't want to see them. The people who had escaped disaster immediately took their leave. However, before they left, the Minister of Works didn't forget to say a few more words that shouldn't be said. For the country and the people, Your Majesty, please think thrice before you act. I believe that His Royal Highness won't disregard the country and the world because of personal grudges. After saying that, the Minister of Works immediately slipped away. The others chimed in with a few words and also ran away. Sichuan Emperor sneered. They usually walked like snails, but now they were like dogs chasing after him. After everyone left, the energy in his body dissipated. Sichuan Emperor immediately collapsed on the back of the chair. He was like a fish out of water, constantly breathing. He didn't know what had happened recently, but his physical fitness had been very poor. He couldn't breathe after saying a few words. If he hadn't forced himself to hold on today, his officials would have found out. Now that there were internal and external troubles, if news of his serious illness spread, the entire Sichuan would be in chaos. The ruler was the pillar of the country. He couldn't fall. Xiao Ji, bring the medicine. Eunuch Xiao had been standing outside for a long time. When he heard the summons, he immediately pushed the door open and came in. Your Majesty, the medicine is here. Sichuan Emperor didn't say anything. He drank the medicine in one gulp and then exhaled heavily. This medicine tastes terrible. Your Majesty, good medicine tastes bitter. The imperial doctor said that you'll be cured after drinking it for a few more days. Eunuch Xiao immediately handed over the candied fruit. Sichuan Emperor waved his hand and rubbed between his eyebrows with his fingers. His expression was very bad. Xiao Ji, why does everyone want him to come back? Eunuch Xiao had heard the conversation of several officials outside the hall before they left. Naturally, he knew who His Majesty was referring to. He hesitated for a moment before saying, Your Majesty, are you referring to His Royal Highness? This old servant thinks that it might be because of His Highness's title of war god. Victorious in every battle? Sichuan Emperor sneered. Eunuch Xiao immediately shut up when he heard the frightening laughter. He didn't dare to say anything more. Sichuan Emperor laughed. We've already broken off relations. At this point, will he still help me? Even if he agrees, I'm afraid that he'll take the throne instead. Eunuch Xiao wanted to nod vigorously. Even if His Highness didn't help His Majesty, he would help the common people. However, he knew that His Majesty didn't want to hear this at all, so he didn't dare to say a word. Let me think about it. Sichuan Emperor sighed faintly. Eunuch Xiao felt that he seemed to have aged several years. At this moment, the young Minister of Works, who was still trembling with fear in the imperial study, immediately calmed down after bidding farewell to his colleagues and getting on the carriage. He seemed to be talking to himself to the air. Tell Prince Yi that His Majesty has wavered. I'll persuade him with the other officials. Don't worry, Your Majesty. The Minister of Works was someone that Xiao Ho placed beside the Minister of Works. On the surface, he worked for the imperial court, but in reality, he worked for Xiao Ho. After that, someone responded, and then there was no more sound. The Minister of Works smiled. In fact, His Majesty had long wanted Xiao Su to come back to help, but he couldn't bring himself to ask. He believed that as long as they tried a few more times, they would succeed. Let's go. Chapter 1422. In the evening, Chu Qingyan and Xiao Su had dinner with Mr. and Mrs. Chu. While they were eating, Mr. Chu suddenly asked, Will we be homeless if we stick a spring onion in the back? Everyone at the table was confused by his question. Xiao Su was the first to react. Why would you say that, old master? Mr. Chu rubbed his nose and said honestly, I heard someone say that many people are attacking our country today. They are saying that the warehouse country, the flower country, the building country, and so on. They are going to eat up Sichuan very soon. We are going to live a life of misery in the future. Chu Qingyan could not help but twitch her lips. Where did her father hear that from? It was one thing to use the wrong idiom, But how could he make such a sophisticated name sound so down to earth? Her father was so talented. Although Mr. Chu was telling the truth, Xiao Su could not help but smile. Mrs. Chu could not help blushing and hurriedly explained for her husband, "Your father heard it from someone else, but he can't remember it clearly. That's why he made a fool of himself." Xiao Su said it was fine, then turned to Mr. Chu and said, "We won't be homeless, and we won't live a life of misery. I can promise you that." Chu Qingyan really wanted to laugh, but since Big Ice Block had said so, she immediately stopped smiling and said to her parents in a serious tone, "Father, Mother, don't worry. We will protect you. Also, as long as you are here, anywhere is home." Mrs. Chu nodded happily. She had not misjudged her son-in-law. Her daughter was also very capable. She felt that her life was complete. Mr. Chu also put on a serious expression and nodded. However, he did not look handsome or serious for more than 3 seconds. Mr. Chu blinked and said to his son-in-law, "Stick a spring onion in the back? Do you need more people? The kind who can fight." When she walked out of her parents' tent, Chu Qingyan was still in a state where her body and soul were separated. It wasn't until someone bowed to them that her soul quickly returned to its original position. She strode forward and caught up with the person in front of her. Puzzled, she asked, "Big Ice Block, why didn't you refuse Daddy's request? It's rare for the old master to have something to do, and it's out of kindness. As a junior, I shouldn't dampen his enthusiasm." Xiao Su knew that she would ask such a question, so he smiled. "That's true, but why do you need him to defeat Wood Spirit and Ethereal?" Chu Qingyan asked a question that confused her even more. "Because the two of them have the most free time right now." "That's not what I mean." Xiao Su stopped and turned to look at her with a smile. "Do you think the old man can beat the two of them?" Chu Qingyan shook her head without even thinking about it. Xiao Su raised his hand and scratched her nose. "That's right. What's a better way to persuade people than to let them back down? Won't the problem be solved then? It won't dampen the old man's spirits and it will achieve its goal. Isn't it the best of both worlds?" Chu Qingyan couldn't care less about being teased. She thought that the big ice cube was right. Seeing him walk away, she couldn't help but raise her feet to follow. A thought suddenly flashed through her mind. What if Daddy really did it? However, this thought was quickly rejected by her. She shook her head and immediately ran towards him. When the two of them entered the main tent, there were already people waiting for them. Hua Ling and Turan bowed to the two of them. Then, without needing Xiao Su's instructions, Turan began to report. "So far, the Southern Song Army has taken down 5 cities. The Junlan country has taken down 3, and the Lulan country has taken down 3. The number is still rising and has affected nearly 20 cities. Right now, Li Weiyuan has split up with 200,000 soldiers to stop the Southern Song Army and the Junlan country. The 4th prince is leading troops to the Lulan country, but he still can't catch up to their speed of taking down the cities." Xiao Su frowned. He didn't expect the 3 countries to be so fast. Were they too weak or were the other side too strong? At this moment, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but ask, "The Lulan country has the fewest people. Why did they take down the same number of cities as the Junlan country? I remember that the defenses of those cities aren't weak. How did they take down 3 cities so quickly?" This question was exactly what Xiao Su was puzzled about. Hua Ling immediately whimpered, "Masters, you don't know. According to our brothers, those people from the Lulan country aren't easy to deal with. They carry poison with them. Once released, it can make people retreat without a fight. It's very scary." "Poison?" Chu Qingyan thought of the scorpions, centipedes, and cobras all over the ground. Her whole body itched. Although what she imagined was different from the poison in the Lulan country, at least the toxicity was similar. What kind of background does the Lulan country have? Chu Qingyan couldn't help but rub her arms. Hua Ling shook his head, his expression ugly. "Although we don't know much about it, it can be traced back to 100 years ago. Our Empress Dowager sent troops to take over the Lulan country, but halfway through, 100,000 troops never returned. They didn't leave behind any corpses. It's very strange. The Empress Dowager sent people to investigate for many years, but to no avail. It's as if these 100,000 people disappeared from the face of the earth. No one has seen them since. Could it be that those people were treated as food and eaten by poison? Chu Qingyan's face paled. This was already beyond the description of scary. Xiao Su's expression darkened. Hualing, have Water Spirit investigate the Lulan country. Hualing didn't delay and immediately left the tent. What's the news from the capital? Xiao Su asked. A while ago, the third prince used some tricks to make the Liang and Fu families fight each other like dogs. His Majesty was furious and imprisoned many officials. Now that the three countries are attacking, there aren't many people in court that can be used. The third prince's move is giving His Majesty a headache. Someone has already suggested that you return, but His Majesty is putting on airs. Although he said he would consider it, he actually wanted you to return long ago. He's just too embarrassed to ask. Now, he's borrowing someone in court to ask. When the time is right, he'll definitely relent. Xiao Su nodded. It was as he guessed. Oh, that's right. Master, this is the letter the third prince sent over. There's also a jade pendant inside. Turin immediately took out the two items and handed them over. Xiao Su took the jade pendant and played with it. He saw the word, thick, written on it. Confusion appeared in his eyes. This should be something that his third brother carried with him or had some special meaning. But why did he send this to him? Xiao Su opened the letter with confusion. After quickly skimming through the message, Xiao Su's furrowed brows immediately relaxed. This change made Chu Qingyan happy as well. What did the third prince write in the letter to make you so happy? Xiao Su reached out his hand in front of her. The jade pendant fell from his fingertips and the red thread was wrapped around his ring finger. Through the light of the fire, she looked carefully but couldn't find anything. She heard the person in front of her say, I was just vexed about the troops when third brother sent me a solution. 100,000 troops. Chapter 1423. 100,000? Chu Qingyan was stunned. Big Ice Cube, are you telling the truth? Of course. Xiao Su patted her little head and turned to give the jade pendant to Turin. Take it and go to Lion Ridge to find a man named Lin Meng. Turin was also shocked by the news. He took the jade pendant in a daze and didn't know how to react. I'll do it right away. After Turin went out, Xiao Su saw the little fellow reading his third brother's letter from top to bottom. Although there were only a few lines, she seemed to be able to see through them. He couldn't help but take the letter away and raise his eyebrows. Third brother's handwriting is so beautiful? Chu Qingyan was amused by his words. She glanced at him and said, Are you jealous? My big ice cube has become a big vinegar jar again? Xiao Su looked at her with disdain. What's there to be jealous about? If you want to appreciate calligraphy, just come and find me. How could he say that he wasn't jealous? Chu Qingyan said in her heart, but she didn't dare to tell the truth. Okay, you're not jealous. There's no smell of jealousy at all. Back to the topic. How did Prince Yi get so many soldiers? Could it be that he had thought of? She didn't say the word rebellion out loud. She only mouthed it. Xiao Su read her lips and chuckled. That's not the case. Before the truth of the Luo family was revealed, I'm afraid these people were prepared for me. It was only then that Chu Qingyan recalled the fight between the two of them. She couldn't help but suck in a deep breath. Patting her chest, she said with some lingering fear, Fortunately, the truth is out. Otherwise, you would have to bear the blame. Maybe the emperor and the Fu family were the ones who tried to frame the Liang family. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many coincidences that made third brother think that it was my mother and the Liang family who did it. Xiao Su's expression was indifferent. When he talked about the Sichuan emperor, it was as if he was talking about an outsider. Chu Qingyan nodded heavily. When it comes to framing others, no one dares to claim to be the best. She paused and sighed with emotion. Prince Yi's forbearance is admirable. He has kept a low profile for so many years and raised so many troops without being discovered. If he didn't have a strong willpower and a smart mind, he wouldn't have been able to do it. He was born with a weak constitution and had encountered so many poisons as he grew up. To be able to survive until now and even control a faction, Such a person would be terrifying if he were an enemy. Fortunately, the two of them had not reached the point where they would meet on the battlefield. Which member of the imperial family is stupid? Xiao Su mocked. Those who can stay must have gone through inhuman training. The law of the jungle was the law of survival in this world. When she heard him say this, she couldn't help but think of what Big Ice Block had gone through all those years. She couldn't help but feel sorry for him. She reached out and held his fingers. Yes, a sword's edge is sharpened. My Big Ice Block is already a good sword out of its sheath. Now, it's time to collect the debt from those people. He didn't care about the past. He wasn't someone who would hold on to the past. However, when he saw the tenderness and love in the little fellow's eyes, he curled his lips and a touch of sadness appeared on his face. It was as if he was trapped in the past and couldn't extricate himself. If only I had met you earlier. Those years wouldn't have been so lonely. Chu Qingyan's heart was filled with sadness for him. When she heard what he said, her heart softened even more. She reached out and hugged his waist, patting his back gently as if she was comforting an injured child. It's all in the past. Besides, aren't I right in front of you? We have to live in the present. The pain of the past is the metal of our glory. There is always a price to pay for growth. Ayn is right. Xiao Su buried his head in her shoulder and smelled the unique fragrance of her body. He hugged her tightly with both hands and took advantage of the little fellow's tofu with peace of mind. Chu Qingyan didn't notice his little movements. After comforting him, she turned her attention to Xiao Ho. Big Ice Block, I still find it unbelievable that Prince Yi would give all his troops to you. I have to say, he trusted you too much. When we are alone, I don't like to hear you mention other men. So, I want to give you a punishment. Before Chu Qingyan could react, her eyes were occupied by a large black shadow. Her lips were cold and he had already pressed down on her. She felt very innocent before she sank into the abyss. She was talking about serious matters. How could the Big Ice Block bully her? Sure enough, within 2 days, Sichuan Emperor couldn't withstand the pressure and sent someone to deliver a letter to Xiao Su. The letter didn't mention anything about what happened before. It only tactfully asked him to temporarily put aside his personal grudges and fight against the enemy together. Not for the imperial family, but for the common people he had protected for so many years. Chu Qingyan read the letter and wasn't happy. Zhong Win has something to do, Xia Yingchun has nothing to do. A leopard can't change its spots. Hualing said with righteous indignation. For so many years, Master has suffered a lot because of this. If Master still follows His Majesty's orders, I won't be the only one who can't stand it. Everyone will feel aggrieved. After saying this, Hualing secretly glanced at Master, afraid that he would be angry. Chu Qingyan nodded heavily. I agree with Hualing, but we are in a dilemma. If we help, His Majesty will have our weakness. If we don't help, wouldn't our efforts be in vain? Although the army was resting at the foot of the mountain and looked calm on the surface, it wasn't that they didn't do anything. In fact, a large group of people had secretly moved. Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. Isn't that simple? Let him wait for 2 days. The letter seemed to be persuasive and emotional, but it was still the same as before, using responsibility to restrain him. If he easily compromised, then he would be letting down his years of suffering in silence and his brothers who had risked their lives for him. This time, he had to make the emperor correct his attitude and know that he wasn't easy to control. Even if he wanted to beg, he had to act like he was begging. The letter was sent out, but there was no reply. After 2 days, Sichuan Emperor's patience had been worn out. He fiercely slammed the memorial on the table and angrily said, "This unfilial son, does he want me to put down my status and beg him?" The emperor was so angry that the hall shook 3 times. Several ministers looked at each other and saw helplessness in each other's eyes. They all knew what His Majesty wrote in that letter. If they were the King of England, they wouldn't agree either. The country was in danger, but His Majesty was still putting on airs. What should they do? At this time, under the signal of the Minister of War, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of War held the urgent military report and said with a dignified expression, "Your Majesty, the latest news from the front line, Luli City and Anqing City are about to fall. These words were like a basin of cold water poured over Sichuan Emperor's head. His exasperated anger was immediately extinguished. He raised his hand to cover his eyes and felt dizzy. His face was full of vicissitudes of life. He was unwilling to be humiliated but also helpless. In the dark, it seemed that something was gradually out of control. Xiao Ji, prepare the brush and ink. Let me write another letter. Sichuan Emperor's voice suddenly sounded old. Chapter 1424. Big Ice Cube, there's something I don't understand. Looking at the person drawing on the map, Chu Qingyan wanted to recall the meeting with the generals to discuss how to resist the enemy country. She suddenly remembered a question that she had ignored before and couldn't help but support her chin with her hand. Xiao Su looked up and motioned for her to continue. She immediately said, "Why would Junlan cooperate with Nansong? I remember that 5 years ago, when we passed by Junlan, we helped Gentleman Sheng resolve the internal strife and let him sit firmly on the throne. Now that he's doing this, isn't he repaying evil with good?" Thinking of this, she felt that she had misjudged him back then. She had actually helped an ingrate. On the surface, he was smiling with you, but behind your back, he stabbed you. Xiao Su said disapprovingly, "The relationship between countries depends on interests, not relationships." Junlan experienced the rebellion of the vassals last time. In addition to the problems left behind by the previous emperor, the national treasury has long been empty. Water Spirit found out that in recent years, they have experienced drought, and there has been no harvest. Their national strength has declined, and they are no longer as strong as they were in the past. So when Junlan saw that we had good weather, abundant food, and the people lived and worked in peace, they coveted it. When Pang Huang proposed cooperation, it was exactly what he wanted. Otherwise, his troops wouldn't have come so quickly. He must have had this idea long ago. With his reminder, Chu Qingyan was able to piece together the pieces of her puzzle together to make a pretty good guess. Xiao Su nodded approvingly. When a country has reached the point where the people can't make a living, don't have enough to eat and wear, it's not surprising that they will do something. Chu Qingyan sneered. If we hadn't helped him back then, Junlan would have been split up by those vassals. Gentleman Xing wouldn't be here today. Xiao Su raised his hand and patted her shoulder. There are no eternal enemies, and no eternal friends. This is the imperial power. She pouted and nodded. Let's not talk about them. I have something to discuss with you. Go ahead. Xiao Su was a little surprised. Chu Qingyan giggled, hugged his arm and said coquettishly, "Promise me first." Xiao Su looked at her calmly, then pulled his arm out of her hand and wagged his index finger in front of her face. "You're trying to curry favor for no reason. It's better if I don't listen." After he finished speaking, he walked out of the main tent with his hands behind his back. Chu Qingyan made a funny face at his back. The big ice cube was too smart. However, she would not give up on this matter. After giving herself some encouragement, she immediately chased after him. She didn't believe that she couldn't convince him today. 2 days later, when Chu Qingyan received Sichuan Emperor's reply, only her howling cavalry, Lai army, and the beast horde were left in the camp. However, on the surface, it still looked like an army of 100,000. After reading the contents of the letter, Chu Qingyan snorted. I really should let the big ice block read this letter. Sure enough, he was a flexible emperor. After being ignored by the big ice block for a few days, he immediately changed his attitude. She had never seen such a shameless person. Although she knew that he was only saying this because of the crisis that Sichuan was facing today and was not sincere, he was an old fox. It was already very difficult for him to go this far. She couldn't force him to do anything. Otherwise, things would go in the opposite direction. Chu Qingyan said to Jean Exon, "Send the letter that His Highness prepared before he left back to the capital." Jean Exon obeyed the order. As early as when the news of the 3 countries' encirclement came, the big ice block did not intend to sit back and do nothing. He had already begun to deploy in private. He had already sent people out, but on the surface, he was biding his time and negotiating with the Sichuan emperor to force him to state his position. This was the difference between active and passive. It also meant that the big ice block was no longer the king of England who could be easily manipulated. So yesterday, the big ice block left in advance with 100,000 troops to the north, leaving her to guard the camp. Now her task was completed. At this time, Ethereal lifted the curtain and came in, respectfully saying, "Little princess, this subordinate has prepared the medicine for your injuries. We can set off now." Chu Qingyan heard and nodded. She took the helmet that Xining handed over and put it on. Then she walked out of the tent valiantly and stepped onto the high platform. Standing in the middle of the field, she looked down at her army. The Howling Cavalry and the Lai Army occupied half of the training field. Then there were Xiao and Bai Yutang, followed by a small team behind them. Chu Qingyan was solemn. "All teams report." Jean Exon stepped out with a serious face. "The Howling Cavalry is all here." Fong Lu stepped out and respectfully shouted, "The Lai Army is all here." Xiao stepped out and lazily responded, "Xiao xiao xiao xiao." Bai Yutang stepped out and howled to the sky, "A woo a woo." If an outsider saw this scene, it would be hard to associate it with a military parade. They had never seen such a strange combination of troops. But it was this group of troops that would later write a legend. Chu Qingyan nodded in satisfaction and waved her arm, "Break camp and set off." The plains were instantly cleaned up. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to see that there had been an army here. Little Sea soared into the sky, craning its neck and calling out loudly. Those eagles that were resting in the forest immediately flapped their wings and flew towards it. Immediately, a black mass appeared, as if dark clouds were gathering, causing people to feel a chill in their hearts. Bai Yutang and the other two stood on the hillside and cried out a few times. Rustling sounds could be heard coming from the mountain forest. Not long after, all the ferocious beasts that could be called out with extreme lethality appeared, following behind them in an orderly manner. It was hard to imagine that they would have such an obedient side. Chu Qing rode her warhorse and looked back in the opposite direction. She didn't know where the big ice block and the others were now. She didn't know when they would meet again after this parting. She couldn't help but think of the conversation she had with him 2 days ago. "Big ice block, leave the Lulan army to me," she discussed with him. "No." Xiao Su rejected without even thinking about it. She didn't get angry and said seriously, "Big ice block, you know very well that they have poisonous creatures. I have a herd of beasts. I have a better chance of winning against them." Xiao Su also stared at her seriously. "It's because they are poisonous creatures and not humans that you're not suitable to go. Beasts can deal with humans, but they have the same effect against poisonous creatures as humans. No, Bai Yutang and the others are more agile than humans, and they are smaller targets. They are also animals and won't have a fear of poisonous creatures like humans, so..." Chu Qingyan looked up with bright eyes. "This time, it has to be me." Xiao Su was choked by her words. That's right, there was no better choice than the little fellow. In the end, he reached out and pulled her into his arms. He had never used so much strength before, as if he wanted to embed her into his bones. The two didn't speak. In the end, he took a deep breath and closed his eyes, saying softly, "Okay." That night, he pestered her and tore her apart again and again. He couldn't wait and was extremely passionate and domineering. She felt like she was a dish that he patiently tasted over and over again. When she woke up the next day, he was no longer on the bed, and there was not a single part of her body that was intact. It was clear how ruthless he was. Her thoughts returned to the army in front of her. She pursed her lips and gripped the reins tightly. It was a small separation, but they would be reunited soon. Her red clothes and black hair fluttered in the wind. She smiled confidently. "Hiya." Chapter 1425. Haiyu City. Fourth Highness, the army can't hold on much longer. The enemy plans to attack with fire. There are trees everywhere. If the fire starts, it will be over. Time waits for no one. You have to plan quickly. Yen Shi hurriedly ran over. At this moment, he looked anxious and desperate. Xiao Ran stood on top of the mountain. His arm was still bleeding, and the color of his robe could no longer be seen. Although he panicked when he heard the news, he was still calm. Have all the citizens in a 100-mile radius been moved? Yen Shi lowered his head and knelt down with a bang. The soldiers sent to escort them were stopped by the Southern Song army. Now that there's no news, I'm afraid that the citizens are also. Yen Shi gritted his teeth. The Southern Song army has surrounded the entire city. I'm afraid that they want to massacre the entire city. Xiao Ran couldn't help but take a step back. His face was full of shock. Then he clenched his fists. His eyes were red as he gnashed his teeth. The Southern Song army has gone too far. Not counting the soldiers, there were at least 100,000 citizens here. If the fire started, the consequences would be unimaginable. General Yen Shi heard His Highness call out to him. Faintly feeling that there was something wrong with his voice, he immediately raised his head. This general is here. Let's fight it out with them. Xiao Ran's eyes were resolute. Yen Shi immediately said, Fourth Highness, you must not. This general will stay behind to command. You must quickly leave with your soldiers. At this time, you cannot have any mishaps. The imperial court needs you. At this time, what's the use of saying these things? Go and pass down the order. I will fight with my back to the river. I will live and die with the army. Xiao Ran said firmly. Knowing that he had made up his mind, Yen Shi sighed heavily. Then he nodded and staggered away. Xiao Ran looked at the brightly lit battlefield again. Suddenly, he remembered the move he used against his brother a few days ago. He never thought that after going around in circles, he would be forced into a dead end by this move. At that time, he was eager to win and didn't care about the consequences. Only now did he know how great the price he had to pay. Half an hour later, when everyone had gathered in the main city, the Southern Song army launched another attack. This time they used fire to attack. Arrows with kerosene flew over the city walls and into the city. Below the city gate, more than 10 people hugged a thick wooden pillar and slammed it fiercely. Your Highness, they're about to attack. A deputy general staggered over with blood all over his body. After saying this, he fell unconscious to the ground. Xiao Ran pursed his lips, his eyes filled with anger. Yen Shi, open the city gates and meet the enemy. If he stayed in the city, he would be burned to death. If he rushed out, he would be ambushed. Either way, he would die. However, he couldn't just sit and wait for death. A person could choose to give up, but he couldn't give up on a choice. He was fighting with his back against the wall. The city gates opened wide. Everyone held their weapons and rushed out. As if anticipating that they would make a move, the archers lying in ambush immediately fired a rain of arrows at them. Soon, the soldiers who ran in front fell one by one. Before they could even shout out, they had already died. Xiao Ran saw his soldiers fall without any resistance. His heart was filled with pain and anger. The sword in his hand mercilessly pierced towards the enemy. The more blood his hand was stained, the more his clothes were torn. Wounds appeared one after another, but he didn't care. At this time, he only wanted to kill these bandits who invaded other people's land. Pang Huang stood on a high slope and looked down at the battlefield at the city gate. The red-eyed Xiao Ran fell into his eyes. Pang Huang lightly exclaimed, "Who is that person?" Replying to the crown prince, "It's Sichuan's fourth prince, Xiao Ran." Someone behind him replied. Pang Huang suddenly understood. So it was him. He had fought a few battles with Sichuan, the commander-in-chief of the army, but he had only heard of his name and not seen him, just like when he was in the capital. But when his gaze returned to Xiao Ran, he shook his head. A faint trace of mockery flashed through his eyes. Xiao Ran and Xiao Su are too far apart. It's like the difference between heaven and earth. I don't know if the Sichuan emperor is blind. He didn't want such a good seedling and chose such a crooked melon and cracked dates. He's been an emperor for so many years in vain. How laughable. As he spoke, Pang Huang revealed a gloating smile. But it's also thanks to this muddle-headed emperor that we have the opportunity today. This is a good opportunity for us to destroy the Sichuan. Your Highness, do you think Xiao Su will help them? One of the generals was somewhat worried. Thinking back to the battle with Sichuan, He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. It was clear that Xiao Su still had some lingering influence. Pang Huang frowned slightly, but after some thought he chuckled. Impossible. He was forced to this point, but he turned around to help. He's not a fool. He wouldn't do such a thing. He's already benevolent enough not to stab them in the back. Repaying evil with good doesn't exist in people like us. If he joins in and splits the Sichuan, perhaps the situation will become even more chaotic, making it easier for us to act. This crown prince doesn't intend to swallow the entire Sichuan, but no matter how much he eats, don't expect this crown prince to spit it out. Toli, who had been by Pang Huang's side all this time, laughed heartily and cupped his hands. Then this general congratulates your highness on your victory. Pang Huang's lips curled into a smile. He stood with his hands behind his back, facing the wind. From his vantage point, he looked down as if everything was under his control. These people were only stubbornly resisting. In another 2 hours, they would have no choice but to surrender. At that time, the southern blue flag would be planted in this city once more. Shouts of killing, banging on the door, and the clashing of weapons echoed in the air. However, at some point, there was another sound. It was the sound of horse hooves. As the sound approached, it became louder and louder. When Pang Huang sensed that something was wrong, his sharp gaze swept into the distance, only to see a black mass in the billowing smoke rapidly approaching at a speed visible to the naked eye. When he saw what was coming, his face suddenly changed. "Your Highness, there's a group of people moving in this direction." A soldier knelt in front of him, his voice urgent. Pang Huang didn't seem to notice as he stared at the person riding the horse in front of him. How could it be him? Below the city gates, the ground was dyed red with blood. Sichuan soldiers were sacrificed one after another. Xiao Ran led his men and fought a bloody path to protect the city gates. However, Yan Shi dealt with the enemy that was preparing to ambush Xiao Ran. He quickly walked to his side and said anxiously, "Your Highness, we can't hold on anymore." Hold on. Xiao Ran was covered in blood. It was hard to tell if it was his or someone else's. When he heard this, he felt a metallic taste in his throat. However, he forced himself to hold on. Just as he was about to give the order, he heard someone shout, "The city has been breached." Xiao Ran spat out a mouthful of blood. His body swayed. If Yan Shi hadn't been standing beside him and quickly supported him, he might have fallen to the ground. "Your Highness, Your Highness?" Yan Shi immediately called out. In a flash, Xiao Ran raised his head. He saw a figure riding in the distance. The tall and straight figure on the horse's back was so familiar. Chapter 1426. The King of England. It's His Royal Highness. We're saved. We're saved. Someone in the crowd shouted. Immediately, there were people who cheered, and there were people who cried tears of joy. Xiao Ran was pulled back to reality by the cheers. He looked at the person who came through the fire and heard the voices calling him the savior. He suddenly felt a little mocking. No matter when, as long as his brother was there, he would be overshadowed and his presence would be extremely low. They were clearly his people, but in the end, they bravely killed the enemy because of his brother. How laughable! However, Xiao Ran forgot that in this kind of situation where they were besieged on all sides, everyone had long since lost their desire to live. Now that Xiao Su's arrival had brought them hope to live, how could the soldiers not fight bravely? Fight for a chance to live? As soon as Xiao Su arrived, Wu Lin and Lu Weiyan, who were by his side, had already spread out and surrounded the southern Tsang army in the middle, forming a situation where the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. The cicada was the soldier that Xiao Ran led to defend the city, while the mantis was the army led by Pang Huang, who thought that he could take them down. Pang Huang looked at Xiao Su, who had caused him to lose many soldiers the moment he appeared. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he muttered, "How is this possible? How can it be him? Shouldn't he be thousands of miles away now?" Not only Pang Huang, but Xiao Ran also had the same question. After he came here, he specially sent people to inquire about the whereabouts of Xiao Su's army. The news he received was that they were still recuperating at their previous location. Suddenly, a thought appeared in his mind, and Xiao Ran was stunned by himself. Looking at Xiao Su, his eyes couldn't help but widen. Could it be that he used the same method as before? Had he quietly shifted his position? At this time, Xiao Ran was so shocked that he lost his composure. His eyes revealed too much information. Xiao Su and Xiao Ran looked at each other across the sea of people, but he quickly looked away. His younger brother was still too young. Everything was written on his face. How could he not be at a disadvantage when facing a cunning old fox like Pang Huang? No wonder this city was breached in less than 3 days. Fortunately, he arrived in time. Otherwise, it would be difficult to reclaim it. Previously, Xiao Ran could use those schemes to deal with him, so why couldn't he use them in reverse? Therefore, the older, the wiser. No matter how powerful the disciple was, he couldn't surpass the master. Xiao Su no longer paid attention to Xiao Ran. This was not the time to throw a tantrum. If Xiao Ran could not pull himself together, then he would be a hopeless ado, and it would have nothing to do with him. Xiao Su searched for Pang Huang's figure in the firelight. At this time, Pang Huang would definitely appear. Sure enough, Xiao Su felt a gaze staring at him. He turned his head and met Pang Huang's gaze. Pang Huang was not surprised that he would be found. War gods were born with keen senses, so it was normal for them to discover him. However, the fact that the other party immediately led his troops to charge at him when he discovered him caught Pang Huang off guard. He had sent all his troops to attack the city. Now, he only had a small team by his side. It was impossible to resist Xiao Su's menacing troops. Cover him. Because Xiao Su's arrival was too unexpected, Pang Huang didn't react for a moment. Only now did he come back to his senses. He immediately gave the order, and then someone brought over his warhorse. He jumped onto the horse and quickly left under the protection of the guards. It wasn't that he was afraid of Xiao Su. With his martial arts, he had no problem fighting Xiao Su one-on-one. But the key point was that this wasn't the time for a one-on-one fight. It wasn't wise to show off his bravado. When Xiao Su brought his men to the top of the mountain, he only saw Pang Huang's silhouette leaving with his men. "General, should we still chase?" Gao Haoist. Xiao Su retracted his gaze and waved his hand. "No need. We will meet again sooner or later. Let's return to the city first." When they returned to the city gate, the fighting had already stopped. Only Wu Lin and the others were left cleaning up the battlefield. Ever since Xiao Su had brought his troops over, the southern Song army had been caught unprepared, and the western Xian army's enthusiasm had soared. Being attacked from both sides, the southern Song army had long been utterly defeated. When Pang Huang gave the order to retreat, Xiao Su's encirclement had not yet been formed, which gave the southern Song army an opportunity. However, Xiao Su did not intend to destroy the southern Song army. He knew that this was a hard bone to chew. He could not bite it in one breath. However, at this time, the city gate was closed. Xiao Su and his men were left outside the city. "Your Highness, without your orders, this general did not enter the city after defeating the southern Song army. However, I did not expect that the fourth prince would immediately close the city gates after entering the city. This action is too chilling. It's as if they are guarding against thieves. Too infuriating." Wu Lin had a straightforward personality. He directly voiced out his complaints. In any case, they were here to help. How could he use such a method to deal with his savior? This Xiao Ran was simply a vile person. Xiao Su glanced at the city gate tower. After the battle just now, the city walls were filled with traces of fire and smoke. It was obvious that the battle was fierce. Finally, Xiao Su turned his gaze to the top of the city gate tower. He saw Xiao Ran standing there, coldly looking at him. Xiao Su was not surprised. It was very likely that Xiao Ran had not received the news that he had promised the Sichuan emperor to fight the enemy together. "Don't worry. Tell them that if they don't open the gate, we will fight our way in." Xiao Su did not have the patience to waste time with Xiao Ran. If they did not open the gate, he had many ways to enter. When Wu Lin heard this, he gladly agreed. He was not used to Xiao Ran. If Xiao Ran did not agree, he would have an excuse to fight his way in. At this time, Xiao Ran had just finished reading a letter sent by a messenger pigeon. His hand that was holding the letter trembled slightly. He didn't expect that his imperial father would really ask his imperial brother for help. He also didn't expect that his imperial brother would actually agree under such circumstances. At this time, Wu Lin's voice rang out. "People in the city, listen up. If you don't open the gate, we will fight our way in." These extremely domineering words made Xiao Ran snap out of his daze. Their old friendship was gone. His brother did not give him any face and directly used the simplest and most violent method to deal with him. He secretly clenched his fist. His brother was really fearless. However, he did not have the ability to resist now. It was too powerless and infuriating. Yan Shi also knew the contents of the letter and was worried about the current situation. Looking at the silent Xiao Ran, he could not help but say anxiously, "Your Highness, let's put aside our personal grudges and let them in. We are not their match now. If we force ourselves, we will only be asking for trouble." Xiao Ran closed his eyes. How could he not know? It was just that he had nowhere to vent his anger. Forget it, let them in. He compromised. With such a great disparity in power, he had no choice but to accept them. Yan Shi heaved a sigh of relief and immediately turned to send people to do it. Wu Lin waited for a while and was getting impatient. Just as he was about to roll up his sleeves and fight, a creaking sound was unexpectedly heard. Then, the heavy city gate slowly opened in the night. Chapter 1427. Xiao Su led his men into the city. Xiao Ran was the one who welcomed them. At this time, he was still dressed in a blood-red battle robe. Although he looked very disheveled, the arrogance on his face and the aura he exuded made people ignore everything else. "Imperial brother, I just received a personal letter from Imperial father and knew that you came to help us. I have offended you just now. I hope Imperial brother and the soldiers won't take offense." When he met Xiao Su's eyes, Xiao Ran's expression suddenly changed. With self-reproach and guilt, he bowed slightly to Xiao Su and the generals behind him. Xiao Su raised his eyebrows and looked at him non-committally. Only then did the generals behind Xiao Su restrain their dissatisfaction. Since Xiao Ran had said so, it was not good for them to show it. However, anyone with a brain knew that his self-reproach was fake. His goal was to appease the troops. When the soldiers guarding the city saw that he had rejected their reinforcements, they already had objections in their hearts. They were also dissatisfied that they had been rejected. If Xiao Ran did not do something, they were afraid that when the time came, not only would their own people be at odds with them, they would also not let him go. Xiao Su responded indifferently. After the brotherhood was gone, there was no need to be polite. Except for his own people, Xiao Su had always been cold and indifferent. It was not targeted at others. As a proud son of heaven, being ignored like this made Xiao Ran a little angry. However, he knew that he had to focus on the overall situation at this moment. The hands hidden in his battle robes subconsciously clenched, trying to restrain his anger. "Then Imperial brother, please come this way." Xiao Ran raised his hand and invited. Xiao Su had already dismounted and handed the reins to Turin. He turned around and looked at Xiao Ran indifferently. "There is no need to entertain me. You just need to allocate a place for this king's troops to rest. If you want to discuss business, send someone to pass on the message." Xiao Ran pursed his lips in the face of his brother's distant attitude. In the end, he nodded and ordered Yan Shi to bring them over. At this moment, a deputy general hurriedly ran over. "Fourth Highness, we still haven't found the batch of commoners that were sent out." Xiao Ran was shocked. It was not only the common people, but also his 10,000 soldiers. At this time, Xiao Su stopped and turned to look at him again. His expression was even more indifferent. This prince saved those people on the way here. Xiao Ran was stunned. Only then did he remember that the direction he had escorted the people out was the direction his imperial brother had led the army from. Although he was relieved to know that the group of people were safe and sound, the person who had saved them was the person in front of him. He felt a little uncomfortable in his heart and did not want to owe him any more favors. He felt that he was inferior to him again. Xiao Su didn't pay attention to Xiao Ran's conflicted look. He clasped his hands behind his back and said coldly, "Xiao Ran, if you had such a worried heart, you wouldn't have attacked with fire without considering the consequences and destroyed 3 villages for nothing." After saying that, Xiao Su did not look at his brother's expression and directly turned to leave. Xiao Ran was stunned on the spot. He stared blankly at his back. His silver battle robes fluttered in the wind. His figure was tall and straight, as if he was living an indomitable spirit. Xiao Ran had never felt so defeated before. Pang Huang returned to the camp. Although he had successfully escaped danger, the way he came back was very embarrassing. It could be said that he had fled in defeat, which damaged his dignity. He could not accept it. After gloomy for a long time in the main tent, he slowly exhaled a turbid breath. Although his complexion had improved a lot, his eyes were still gloomy. "Tori! This general is here." Tori quickly stepped forward and responded. "What orders does your highness have? Pass a message to Xiao Su for me." After Pang Huang said that, he whispered a few words. Tori was a little hesitant after hearing this. "Your highness, do you think Xiao Su will agree? He has already fallen out with Sichuan Emperor. I believe that this time he only acted because of the cold. If we give him some benefits, do you think he will still stand on Sichuan's side?" Pang Huang let out a light breath, his expression not as ugly as before. He leaned back in his chair and raised his hand to rub his aching head. Tori felt that the crown prince's words made sense. That's right, us generals hate to be suspicious and have a fierce temper. The things that Sichuan Emperor did to Xiao Su are enough for a general to draw his sword. This general will send someone to do it. All right, let's do our best to invite him out. This crown prince doesn't believe that Xixian can escape our meticulous plan this time. Pang Huang smiled coldly. His eyes flashed with a determined light. The moon set and the dawn was dark. Slowly the sun rose. On the other side, it had just drizzled and the air was a little moist. As they passed through the tall grass, they would occasionally be soaked by the rainwater on the branches and leaves. Tens of thousands of beasts rustled as they moved forward, not making a single sound. They were as orderly as humans. Among the beasts, a group of nearly 10,000 people walked quietly, vigilantly observing their surroundings. The leader was a woman with black hair and a red battle robe. Her face was cold and beautiful, and her body exuded a kind of intimidating aura. This person was none other than Chu Qingyan, who was leading a group of soldiers. At this time, they were about to enter the Lulan Kingdom's surveillance range. In order to prevent the enemy from discovering their tracks, they had made preparations in advance. They had chosen the most secluded barren mountain, but it was also the fastest direction. However, the journey was very difficult. While they were resting, several soldiers were bitten by snakes. Ethereal was treating them. At this time, Chu Qingyan also walked to their side to check on them. "How are your injuries?" "A few were bitten by snake venom, but it's not a big problem. I have the antidote here. Later, I'll get someone to pick some herbs for everyone to carry with them. Those poisonous snakes and insects won't dare to come close." Ethereal helped to bandage their wounds and smiled at her, indicating that she didn't have to worry too much. Chu Qingyan nodded. They were about to face the Lulan Kingdom, which was adept at dealing with poisonous creatures. If they died here before meeting anyone, it would not be worth it. What's more, she did not want her soldiers to be scared off by these poisonous snakes and insects. If that happened, wouldn't they be even more afraid of walking in the face of these poisonous creatures? However, she had to admit that the fierce soldiers that Big Ice Cube helped her pick were a group of geniuses. Not only did they not make a sound after being bitten by a snake, but they also directly dismembered the snake and roasted it. Moreover, they didn't make a sound along the way. This made Chu Qingyan very satisfied because they didn't have much time left. They had to get to the front line as soon as possible. This mountain is very barren. There are no signs of people and no mountain paths. It's like it hasn't been developed. Ethereal finished bandaging the last soldier and walked to her side. She pointed at the gray patch of cattail grass in front of them. Chu Qingyan said with a smile, "There are no roads in the world. When many people walk on them, they become roads." Little princess consort is right. Ethereal nodded. Just as she was about to say something, there was a sudden commotion in front of them. Then they heard the howls of wolves and tigers. Chu Qingyan's expression changed slightly and she immediately stood up. Chapter 1428. What's going on? As soon as Chu Qingyan spoke, someone immediately came to report. Su Wu's face was serious as he reported, "Master, there are 2 people in front. Let's go and take a look." Chu Qingyan walked forward. Ethereal also followed behind her. Before his master left, he had told him to stay close to the little princess consort. The Lulan kingdom was rich in poisons, so he must not let the little princess consort fall into their trap. When Chu Qingyan walked under the tree, she saw an unconscious old woman and a 16 or 17-year-old boy who was hugging her tightly and looking around in panic and vigilance. Their clothes were ragged, as if they had just experienced a disaster. Their bodies were black and she couldn't see their original appearance. Su Er stood at the side and watched the two. When he saw his master coming over, he didn't wait for her to ask and took the initiative to whisper, "Master, this is a mother and son who fled from Rao-Hizhou. In order to avoid being discovered by the Lulan army, they took this route. This subordinate has already checked their identities, and it's true." Chu Qingyan's frown eased when she heard this. "It's good that they're not spies from Lulan. Why did you capture us? We have no grievances or grudges, let us go." No matter how the boy shouted before, no one paid attention to him. Now that he saw how respectful everyone was to Chu Qingyan, he guessed that she was the leader here and immediately mustered up his courage to question her. Unfortunately, his trembling voice revealed his emotions. He was scared and helpless. Chu Qingyan turned to look at him and smiled faintly, "Don't worry, we won't hurt you." This boy could still remain calm in the face of such a situation and protect his mother. This made her admire him a little, so she comforted him with a few words. Then she turned to tease Ethereal. "Ethereal, aren't you going to pick herbs? Su Wu and the others are also here. Call a few of them to help you. You don't have to stay by my side. Don't always take your master's words as an imperial edict. I'm not a child." Among her howling cavalry, there were a few who knew a little about medicine. Ethereal couldn't help but laugh. Seeing that they were just ordinary citizens, he nodded. "Young consort is right. This subordinate will go now." The youth was still glaring at Chu Qingyan with a guarded look, but when he heard that the person beside her knew medicine, his face lit up and he immediately knelt down, kowtowing to Chu Qingyan. "Miss, please save my mother, I beg you." Chu Qingyan and Ethereal exchanged glances before turning to the frail young man. "What happened to your mother?" "My mother was poisoned. She has been unconscious for a day and hasn't woken up." The young man sobbed. Ethereal nodded at his little princess consort, then stepped forward and asked, "Why was your mother poisoned? What kind of poison is it?" The young man raised his head to look at the people surrounding him. Although his eyes were filled with tears, he was still guarded. However, he realized that if he didn't tell the truth, these people wouldn't save him at all. Thus, he gritted his teeth and kowtowed to the ground. "We are from Rao-Hizhou. A few days ago, the people of Lulan invaded our town. When this humble one saw that the situation was bad, he took my mother and fled. But we didn't expect to be bitten by venomous insects on the way. Those venomous insects have never been seen before. It's too scary. My mother is still unconscious. Miss, I beg you please save my mother. I'm willing to be your slave for the rest of my life." He could tell that Chu Qingyan was the one in charge, so he kowtowed to her again and again. Chu Qingyan's eyes lit up. This was most likely a venomous insect brought from Lulan. She didn't expect to encounter it here. This time, she could let Ethereal see if this poison could be cured. At the same time, she could also understand what kind of poison it was. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win 100 battles. Otherwise, she would be in the dark. Ethereal's eyes also showed interest, and she nodded at her. Seeing that he was about to break his head from kowtowing, Chu Qingyan raised her hand to comfort him. Let Ethereal take a look at your mother first. Whether or not she can be cured depends on the diagnosis. We can't guarantee anything. She had to say the ugly words first. Otherwise, she might not be able to cure her even if she gave hope. Ethereal agreed. That's right. Lay your mother flat first so that I can treat her. Hearing this, the young man nodded gratefully. After wiping away his tears, he let go of his mother. Because the young man had been protecting his mother in his arms, they couldn't see her face. Now that the young man lifted the cloth covering his mother's face, they saw that her face was so swollen that it was impossible to see her face. Her eyes were only a slit. Chu Qingyan was shocked. Originally, she thought that this ant was just fat. She didn't expect that her whole body was swollen. Moreover, her skin was a strange red color, which was very terrifying. Ethereal didn't say anything. She immediately went forward to check, and the silver needles between her fingers quickly pierced into the ant's acupuncture points. When she took them out again, the silver needles were actually glowing with a black light. Even Ethereal, who usually didn't change her expression easily, showed a look of disbelief. How is it? Chu Qingyan walked closer and asked. Ethereal shook her head and continued to take the ant's pulse. Then, a row of silver needles appeared in her hands. Her fingers moved slightly, and she inserted them one by one. She then wiped the sweat on her forehead, stood up, and replied with a serious expression, "This ant has been poisoned by a scorpion." Although the poison is very strong, this subordinate can still cure it. However, if we delay it for another half a day, this ant's life will be in danger. The young man at the side kowtowed even louder. I beg you, I can give you my life. Please save my mother. Chu Qingyan raised an eyebrow. Give me a reason to save her. When Ethereal saw this, he immediately retreated behind his little princess, looking like he would only listen to his little princess. Hearing this, the young man's face paled. These people didn't know him, and he was penniless. How could he convince them to save his mother? Chu Qingyan's eyes turned cold. Why should I save someone like you who is full of nonsense? The young man's legs turned to jelly. He raised his head in shock and met that pair of beautiful, penetrating eyes. His entire body trembled. Just now, this young girl had looked very easy to talk to. He didn't expect that she would change her expression so quickly. When Ethereal saw that the young man was frightened by his little princess, he couldn't help but feel amused. He reminded him, if you don't tell the truth, my little princess will lose her patience and leave you all behind. After hearing this, the young man's body trembled even more. He didn't dare to hide the truth anymore and quickly said, I'll tell you. We escaped after being locked up by the Lulan army. There were many commoners who were locked up with us. Because they wanted to feed our blood to those monsters, I took advantage of the fact that they weren't paying attention and escaped with my mother. However, my mother had been fed to the monsters once, so the poison took effect halfway through. I'm telling you the truth, I beg you. They didn't expect that those poisonous creatures needed human blood to survive. Chu Qingyan and Ethereal felt chills run down their spines when they heard this. Ethereal asked, Why are you lying to us? The young man sniffled and boldly pointed at Su-yi and the others. Then he pointed at the snow wolves and tiger stools that were glaring at him. Your people have strange things painted on them, and there are so many ferocious beasts following you. I'm afraid that you are bad people too. Ethereal looked at Su-yi and the others. Their bodies were painted with the same color as Ye's. Their little princess consort said that this was easy to disguise and wouldn't be easily discovered. Glutinous Rice Ball and the others were his little princess consort's pets. They had been together for a long time and were already used to them. However, in the eyes of ordinary people, they were terrifying existences. It was no wonder that the young man was afraid. We're not bad people. Then who are you? We're here to save you. Chapter 1429. The young man's eyes widened as he digested this shocking information. Are you really here to save us? Su-er, who was beside him, laughed and joked. If we're not here to save you, why would we come here? The young man was overjoyed when he heard this. but his head soon drooped. But those people are very powerful and cruel. Can you deal with them? Su Wu shook his head and smiled. If we don't have the ability, why would we rush to our deaths? Young man, open your eyes and look at who is standing in front of you. The young man looked in the direction of Su Wu's finger. It was the girl who was so beautiful that he couldn't take his eyes off her. The young man muttered, I don't know. Do you know the god of war, the King of England? This is my lord's princess consort. The young man was so shocked that he couldn't speak. You're the wife of His Royal Highness who has never been defeated in 100 battles? After receiving Chu Qingyan's acknowledgement, the young man was even more excited than before. He was wild with joy and muttered to himself, we're saved, we're saved. Chu Qingyan was speechless. Was this young man scared out of his wits by the Lulan army? She shook her head and didn't let her people scare him anymore. She turned around and ordered Ethereal to treat the ant. I've already forced the poison to one part of her body. As long as she bleeds once a day for 3 days, along with this Qingqi pill, the poison will be removed from her body. Ethereal explained as he bled. Chu Qingyan nodded and said to the young man, have you seen what the poisonous creature that bit your mother looked like? Have you seen any other poisonous creatures? The young man nodded hurriedly. Yes, I've seen several kinds of poisonous creatures. Good, you tell Ethereal. He needs to know about these. Chu Qingyan pointed the young man to Ethereal. Hearing this, the young man's face showed a troubled expression. But I don't recognize any of those poisonous creatures, and many of them look very strange. Chu Qingyan and the others frowned. They already knew that the Lulan army didn't raise ordinary poisonous creatures. Now that they heard it, their hearts sank. What should they do? The young man's eyes suddenly lit up. Although I can't explain it clearly, I can draw it. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but smile. That's good. Su Tu immediately went to prepare the ink and paper. Seeing that there was nothing else for her to do here, Chu Qingyan gave Su Wu a few instructions and left with her men. Because the pigeon's flying speed was too slow, she and Big Ice Block. Because. Jean Xian, what do you think His Highness is doing now? Chu Qingyan whispered. Jean Xian stood behind her. He knew that his master was thinking about His Highness. He couldn't help but comfort her. His Highness must be killing the enemy in the front line. It's been raining these days. Maybe the pigeon was delayed on the road, or maybe His Highness was too busy to send a message. Chu Qingyan nodded. You're right. The people around him are not to be trifled with. He will be safe. Then he will drive Southern Blue out. It's only been half a month, but she was already reluctant to part with him. She really hoped that this war would end soon. Thinking of this, her face became serious. Jean Xian, give the order. We will set out in 2 hours. Try to reach Rao He province before the sun rises tomorrow morning. The south was the furthest from the place they had set out from, so it would take them a lot of time to reach there. The south was the most prosperous. The Lulan kingdom had probably coveted it for a long time. Occupying a city was enough for them to plunder. That was why their attack speed was the slowest among the 3 kingdoms. That was why they had enough time to reach there. However, they couldn't delay any longer. These people were too crazy. They actually captured civilians to feed those poisonous creatures. Thinking of this made her blood boil. These people were simply unforgivable. At this moment, Ethereal walked towards her. She restrained the anger on her face and asked, how is it? That auntie has woken up. Her life is not in danger. Ethereal smiled. That's good. If you can cure other poisons as well, then our chances of victory will increase. She knew that the poisons cultivated by the Lulan kingdom were not ordinary poisons. Ethereal was able to cure them because he was an expert in this field. It wasn't that these poisons were easy to cure. Furthermore, they needed to be fed by humans. They weren't anything good. I learned about the poison just now by chance. I can't guarantee anything else. Ethereal was also a little worried. The scorpion poison was already extremely potent. He didn't know how the other poisons would be like. Chu Qingyan was deep in thought. Xiu came over with a paper with a strange expression on his face. Master, Kong Feng has finished drawing part of it. I brought it over first. Ethereal received Chu Qingyan's signal and stepped forward to take it. When he saw what was drawn on the paper, his expression suddenly became a little strange. Chu Qingyan saw that both of them had strange expressions on their faces. She couldn't help but reach out and say, "Show me one." She wanted to see what kind of strange things were drawn in there. In Haiyu City. Master, Water Spirit sent a message saying that the old man is missing. Turin hurried over, holding the letter he had just received from the messenger eagle. Xiao Su was flipping through the file. When he heard this, his expression darkened. What's going on? Didn't father and mother return to Lianqing together? How could he be missing? He took the letter and skimmed through it. It said that on the way back to Lianqing, the old man said that he needed to relieve himself and went into the forest. Then, everyone waited for a long time but didn't see him come back. When they went back to look for him, he was already gone. Moreover, there were no traces of wild beasts around, so the possibility of him being captured was ruled out. It was very likely that he got lost on his own. Because they walked quickly, the messenger eagle couldn't find them. Xiao Su looked at the date on the letter. It was already 10 days ago, which means that the old man has been missing for nearly half a month. Water Spirit said that she didn't dare to tell the young princess and asked if you should inform the young princess. Turin asked worriedly, where could the old man go in this chaos? Xiao Su frowned and thought for a while. Don't tell Ian yet. Ask Water Spirit to send more people to increase the search. No matter what, we must find the old man. Turin nodded heavily and immediately ran out. Xiao Su leaned against the back of the chair and rubbed his brows. He hoped that the old man didn't have any accidents. At the same time, in the army that Xiao Su had brought, a figure wearing a soldier's uniform was wandering around where they were stationed. He was holding a steamed bun in his hand and munching on it. Uncle Chu, there's water here. Come and drink it. A young man waved at the wandering man. When the man heard this, he immediately threw the steamed bun aside and jogged over. He snatched the bowl from the young man's hand and gulped down the water. The young man looked at the empty bowl in his hand and couldn't help but find it funny. This Uncle Chu was like a child. He didn't know how he was recruited into the army. When the young man continued to draw water, the man called Uncle Chu rubbed his chin and smiled slyly. Chapter 1430. In the grass forest, Chu Qingyan held the drawing and widened her bell-like eyes. She couldn't help but twitch the corner of her mouth. Where did this monster come from? She had lived for 2 lifetimes, but she had never seen such a strange creature. But she had to admit that Kong Feng's drawing skills were really amazing. He vividly reconstructed those poisonous creatures, just like how the modern police use drawings to reconstruct criminals. Little princess, I didn't expect that the person we randomly picked up is such a talent. Ethereal rarely saw someone with such superb drawing skills, so she couldn't help but praise. Do you think that talents are so easy to pick up? Chu Qingyan couldn't help but tease. Then she thought for a while and asked Shuwu to bring Kong Feng over. Kong Feng came very quickly. Maybe it was because he knew that his mother's poison was almost cured, so he felt relieved. When he saw Chu Qingyan, he immediately knelt down to thank her. No need to be so polite. Get up. Chu Qingyan raised her hand. The young man in front of her had been groomed, revealing his original delicate appearance. He was only 15 or 16 years old, but he was already handsome. She couldn't help but sigh in her heart. It seemed that she had picked up not only a talent, but also a beautiful young man. She didn't beat around the bush and went straight to the point. Have you learned how to draw? Kong Feng nodded. My father was a teacher in a private school. He taught students how to draw. I grew up with my father and was influenced by him, so I know a little bit. These words were modest. These drawings couldn't be drawn with just a little bit of knowledge. Moreover, this famous painter might not be able to draw such a realistic picture. Seeing that Chu Qingyan was still holding on to his drawing, Kong Feng scratched his head in embarrassment and said, if I were to use normal drawing methods to draw these poisonous creatures, I'm afraid that I would not be able to tell. Thus, I added some of my own ideas and even used some of your paints to make it easier for you to identify them. I hope that my drawing is not good enough. Please forgive me." On the side, Kong Ling waved his hand and said with a smile, "Little brother, you're too modest. These maps of yours have helped us a lot." Chu Qingyan nodded and looked at Kong Feng while Ethereal was talking. His drawing skills were a bit like modern color paintings. If it was in modern times, it wouldn't be surprising, but this was ancient times. She couldn't help but think more highly of this person. His ideas were very novel. The ancient people were really smart. No wonder they could invent so many things. Kong Feng was very embarrassed by Ethereal's praise. As if he was encouraged, he ran back, saying that he would draw all the poisonous creatures today. Chu Qingyan and Kong Ling looked at his impatient figure and couldn't help but smile at each other. He was indeed a child, but it was obvious that he was sincere. "Can you recognize them?" After Chu Qingyan's words, Ethereal's face, and Ethereal's mouth. She couldn't recognize the poisonous creatures, but that didn't mean that Ethereal couldn't. He was an expert in the study of poisonous creatures and had dealt with many poisonous creatures since he was young. Ethereal didn't disappoint. His expression became serious as well. He pointed at one of the drawings and explained, "This is a double-headed centipede. It's more poisonous than the scorpion poison that Kong Feng's mother suffered from, but it's much bigger than what was recorded in the medical books." With that, Ethereal changed to another drawing and explained, "This is a yellow worm. Although it's not very poisonous, once it comes into contact with you, your whole body will itch. This itch comes from the bones. In the end, the injured can't stand the itch and most choose to end their own lives. Moreover, this worm has a very strong reproductive ability. It lays eggs every month." Ethereal then picked out a few more creatures and explained. Chu Qingyan's expression became uglier as she listened. It was clear that these were all poisonous and terrifying creatures. Due to some special breeding methods in Lulan, these creatures were larger than their normal counterparts. They looked very vicious and disgusting. "Do you have any ideas on how to deal with them?" Chu Qingyan pursed her lips and asked solemnly. Ethereal frowned and pondered for a while before replying, "I don't have any special ideas at the moment. However, animals are generally afraid of fire. I think these are the same. It's just that it's not easy to deal with them. These poisonous creatures were raised by the Lulan soldiers and were not fed together. Therefore, it would be difficult to eliminate them all at once. It was also too risky to attack them one by one. Once exposed, they would be easily attacked by a group." She also considered Ethereal's concerns. She thought for a while and finally said, "Let's go to Rao Hezhou first before making any plans." Ethereal felt that this was the only thing they could do for now. After hurrying for a while, Chu Qingyan finally arrived at Rao Hezhou with her men. Because their disguises were too realistic, they were not discovered. All the drawings that Kong Feng had drawn were also sent to Chu Qingyan. The more she looked at the poisonous creatures, the more disgusted she felt. The Lulan people were actually raising these strange creatures. It was clear that they were not kind people. She made a prompt decision. "Ethereal, Jin Xan, and Su Yi, come with me to explore the Lulan army camp tonight." The few of them exchanged glances. Ethereal took the lead and said, "Young princess consort, leave the exploration of the camp to us. You can stay with the army and take charge." Chu Qingyan raised her brows at him. "Ethereal, I'm a general now, not a little girl. Don't think of me as a fragile person. Moreover, your master has already allowed me to come out without worry. You don't have to worry about me. Just focus on how to deal with the Lulan army." Ethereal rubbed his nose. It was because his master was too worried that he had to remind her not to do dangerous things. However, it seemed that he could not stop the young princess consort. It was better for him to obey the young princess consort's orders. With the mission set, the few of them changed into their night clothes and immediately rushed towards the nearby town of Rao Hezhou. Once they reached the town, Jin Xen took out 2 curved hooks from the bag on his shoulder. He handed one to his master. The others also took out their hooks and threw them up to the top of the city gate tower. They pulled them down and stabilized them. Then, they immediately followed the rope up and leaped onto the top of the city gate tower. Then, they quickly leaped down the city gate tower. Because they were too fast and timed, by the time the patrolling soldiers reached the place where they had landed, they had already left. After entering the city, Chu Qingyan gestured for them to split into two groups. She and Jean Exen, Ethereal, and Sooth. In order to make the best use of time, the four of them used their qinggong to the maximum and leaped onto the roof. Chu Qingyan looked at the buildings that flew past her feet. They were exquisite and luxurious. She could see how prosperous this town used to be. However, after the Lulan army moved in, it had lost its former glory. She didn't know if it was because she knew that there were poisonous creatures here, but she always felt that the moment she entered the city, it was eerie and made her back shiver. She heaved a sigh of relief and began to focus on searching. At this time, Jean Exen suddenly whispered, "Master, look over there." Chu Qingyan looked in the direction of the voice and saw 2 rows of soldiers standing guard outside a huge house. She couldn't help but squint her eyes. The security was so tight. Could it be that the general of the Lulan army was living inside? Let's go and take a look. Chapter 1431. Chu Qingyan and the man dodged the layers of guards and landed in the big house like butterflies. Let's go to the main hall. Because she was standing on the roof, Chu Qingyan was able to see the brightest spot in the house from above. She pointed to the center and immediately leaped over. When the two of them reached the main hall, they squatted down. Jin Xin carefully removed the tiles from the ceiling, and the light from the inside immediately shone out. Chu Qingyan adjusted to the light and moved closer, peeking through the palm-sized opening. 3 people sat in the center of the hall. They were all wearing colorful clothes that were decorated with peacock feathers. From Chu Qingyan's point of view, they looked like the clothes of a foreign race. The person in the lead was about 30 or 40 years old. He had a mean face and a mustache, and he looked very shrewd. On his left sat a one-eyed man with a terrifying expression, and on his right sat an old man. It's time to feed the sacred objects again. How many people are there in the city now? The mustache man asked. The one-eyed man replied, including the 150 people we caught yesterday, there are a total of 700 to 800 people. It's enough for several meals. The mustache man nodded with satisfaction. Good, you arrange it. Tomorrow night, we'll bring the sacred objects over. The one-eyed man agreed expressionlessly. The expression on Chu Qingyan's face kept changing. She clenched her hands tightly, afraid that she would not be able to control herself and beat these people up. What they said just now was obviously to feed the captured people of the Sichuan kingdom to the poisonous creatures. They were so blatantly indifferent to the lives of the common people. They were insensitive, cruel, and ruthless. If she did not know that her identity would be exposed and the consequences would be uncontrollable, she would have done it now. Master, please bear with it. Jean Exen was frightened by his master's powerful aura and immediately reminded her in a low voice. Chu Qingyan sighed softly and nodded to him, indicating that she would not act impulsively. At this time, the old man opened his mouth. General Liha, those soldiers sent by the Sichuan have been trapped by our people for many days. When do you plan to close the net? Let's get rid of them together tomorrow, and give the holy creatures more food to eat. The mustached man smiled sinisterly. Chu Qingyan frowned. She had been wondering why she hadn't seen the troops sent by the Sichuan along the way. Only now did she know that they had been trapped by these people. From the old man's words, she could tell that the soldiers couldn't even protect themselves. It seemed that the situation was worse than she had imagined. After listening for a while longer and finding no other useful information, Chu Qingyan gestured to Jean Exen, and the two of them quickly retreated. The 4 of them successfully met outside the city. How is it? Chu Qingyan pulled down her mask and asked Ethereal, who also had a cold expression on her face. Yes, Ethereal replied solemnly. All right, we'll talk about it when we get back. Soon, the group returned to their encampment. Ethereal suppressed her anger along the way, but when they reached her territory, she couldn't hold it in anymore and immediately reported to Chu Qingyan what they had found. Just now, this subordinate and Su Yi headed north and found the place where the people were being held. Many of them were old, young, women and children. Moreover, they had all been poisoned by poisonous creatures. Many of them have already been poisoned. If we don't save them now, I'm afraid their lives will be in danger. Chu Qingyan's expression was equally ugly. We also found out that the Lulan army plans to feed the poisonous creatures again tomorrow night. From their tone, I'm afraid that after tomorrow night, these people won't be able to survive. Thinking about how the Lulan people called the poisonous creatures holy creatures, she wanted to laugh coldly. There were people who worshipped such disgusting things as holy creatures. They were simply psychopaths. Ethereal's expression changed. Just as she was about to say something, a figure suddenly pounced on her from the side. Jin Exon had just drawn his sword when he saw who it was and looked at his master. Chu Qingyan raised her hand to indicate for Jin Exon to put away his weapon. She calmly looked at Kong Feng, who was kneeling by her feet. "What are you doing here?" Kong Feng's mind was filled with their conversation just now. He was in a daze and didn't have time to explain that he was here to deliver the painting. He repeatedly kowtowed and begged, "Esteemed Wang Fei, no matter what, please save the people in the city. They're all innocent. I beg you." He had grown up there since he was a child. The people were simple and honest, so he knew everyone. He couldn't bear to see his family and friends lose their lives like this, especially in such a cruel way. A person with such a talent in painting should have a pride that wouldn't bend easily. However, with the invasion of a strong enemy, the destruction of his family, and the cruel treatment, his pride had been obliterated. What was left was just like the city, struggling at death's door and covered in ruins. Chu Qingyan sighed softly and had someone help him up. Her gaze slowly focused and her expression became serious. "Don't worry, we will save them and return your home." With that, she raised her hand to stop Kong Feng and thanked him profusely. "Since you grew up in Raozhou City, you must be very familiar with the terrain. I need a very detailed topographic map now. I'll leave this task to you." Time was of the essence now and she didn't have much time to waste. Kong Feng returned to his senses and immediately nodded. Without another word, he went to draw. An hour later, a detailed map appeared in Chu Qingyan's hands. Chu Qingyan held a branch and lit up the area under the light of the fire. She said to her confidants around her, "This is the place where the people are imprisoned. Tomorrow night, the Lulan people will bring the poisonous creatures over. It's the perfect time for us to catch them all in one fell swoop. There's no time to lose." "But how are we going to deal with them?" Su Yi raised a question. They didn't have to worry about the Lulan army, but those poisonous creatures couldn't be underestimated. "I've found herbs that can repel these poisonous creatures. When you reach the place, light them up and the poisonous creatures won't come close to you. However, because these herbs are extremely precious, there aren't many of them. Everyone has a small handful, but it can only last for the time it takes to burn a stick of incense." Ethereal continued to answer. He had mentioned this to the young princess consort before. It was because of these herbs that the young princess dared to suggest tomorrow night's operation. "That's right. So we have to strive to eliminate all these poisonous creatures within the time it takes to burn a stick of incense." Chu Qingyan paused and pointed to a place. "This is an empty space. You will force the poisonous creatures here and then we will use fire to attack." "Then how do we get in?" Jin Exon asked. They didn't doubt Master's words at all. They also didn't have to worry that there were tens of thousands of soldiers in the city while they only had a few thousand people. The difference in numbers was huge because they still had a team of elite soldiers. Hearing this, Chu Qingyan smiled. Airborne. She had the Eagle King who had thousands of eagle soldiers. How could they not be able to enter this small city? When everyone heard this, they instantly revealed the same smile as the young princess consort. It seemed that tomorrow night would be very exciting and exciting. Chapter 1432. Although the plan was perfect and highly feasible, it was still a bold plan that would fail on the verge of success and implicate the people in the city. Thus, when Chu Qingyan laid out the plan, she did not let go of any details. Time passed quickly as she was nervous and serious. Soon night came. Half of the Lai army had already been sent out to do other important things. At this moment, there were only about 1,000 people by her side. But this time, the main force was her adorable beast army and eagle army. General Fong has already left with his men. Jean Xian stood in front of her and reported. Chu Qingyan nodded and said to the others, "Let's set off too." Everyone responded and quickly climbed onto the eagle army's back, allowing them to lead them into the city. On the other hand, Bai Yutang and the others led their little brothers and quietly approached the outside of the city. After half an incense's time, the group had already arrived at their ambush position and were only waiting for the right time. At this moment, the people in the city were unaware of the situation outside because everyone's attention was focused on the sacred object feeding that was about to take place. If they paid attention to the surroundings outside the city as usual, they would discover that in the dark night, specks of faint green light lit up in the grass. It was so terrifying. And in the sky, there was a large black mass that looked like dark clouds but didn't. It was gloomy and carried a murderous aura. The one-eyed man that Chu Qingyan saw last night was now standing at the place where the people were being held. In front of him stood a black mass of people. These people were similarly dressed in colorful feathered clothing. Some of them had a giant monster by their side, some had one lying on their shoulder, some had one in their hand and one wrapped around their waist. These were the sacred objects that they were talking about and were not much different from the ones in Kong Feng's painting. The captured people were now being chased to the open space. At this moment, when they saw those terrifying monsters with deformed appearances, they were all trembling in fear and hugged each other, afraid that they would pounce on them in a fit of anger. When the Lulan soldiers saw this scene, they revealed contemptuous and complacent expressions. Meanwhile, the poisonous creatures beside them stared at the people in front of them faintly, as if they knew that these people were their food and impatiently hissed. The one-eyed man scanned the crowd and said, "Are all the holy artifacts here?" A soldier stood up and said, "Of the 12 battalions, other than the 11th battalion, the rest are all here." "Very well, let's begin," the one-eyed man coldly ordered. When the soldiers who had been pacifying the irritable and impatient holy objects heard this, they were overjoyed. Just as they were about to release the holy objects in their hands, a wolf howl suddenly came from the sky. Everyone was slightly stunned. Then, they heard a series of ear-piercing eagle cries. Everyone looked up. It would have been better if he hadn't seen it. The moment he saw it, he was so scared that his legs almost went soft. The black clouds above their heads suddenly dispersed, and then they got closer and closer. When they got closer, they saw that they were eagles the same size as eagles. What was even more shocking was that there was actually a person sitting on the back of each eagle. These people were holding a bow in their hands, and the sharp tips of the arrows were aimed at them. "Shoot!" A clear and beautiful female voice pierced through the sky. As soon as he finished speaking, the arrows rained down on them, and the soldiers who couldn't dodge in time were all hit. The unforeseen event happened in the blink of an eye. The second wave of arrows was wrapped in kerosene. The bright red flames were like shooting stars in the sky, raining down on them as if they didn't cost money. By the time the one-eyed man reacted, many of his subordinates had already been hit by the arrows. "Shields! Shields! Where are the archers? Go quickly!" The one-eyed man was a little anxious. It was the first time he had been caught off guard. When he came back to his senses, he immediately thought of a countermeasure. However, no matter how fast he reacted, he couldn't keep up with the unforeseen event. "Not good, sir. There's... The soldier didn't come out for a long time. The one-eyed man kicked him down and said fiercely, "What do you want to say?" There's a wild beast attacking the city outside." The soldier recalled the ferocious wolves, tigers, and leopards he saw on the city tower and was still in shock. What? The one-eyed man didn't understand what was going on. What happened next cleared his confusion. Just as the Lulan army was about to attack the commoners, Chu Qingyan gave the order to attack. Bai Yutang and the other two brought their little brothers and surrounded the 4 city gates. Using the giraffe's height, they stepped on the giraffe's body one by one and jumped onto its head. They leaped onto the city gate tower, and the soldiers who tried to resist were all slapped to death by their claws. "It's a tiger!" "Bear. Ah, don't bite me, don't bite me." Soon, Bai Yutong and the rest took over the entire city tower and quickly ran into the city. They went to support their master. The fastest city in history was breached in the blink of an eye. When the one-eyed man heard that the city had been breached, he was completely stunned. The wild beasts rushing over from afar confirmed this fact once again. But so what if the city was breached? He still had the holy artifact army. Let the holy artifacts attack them. As soon as he finished speaking, he was choked by the scene in front of him. He couldn't say another word. The poisonous beasts raised by the Lulan people were indeed ferocious and poisonous. Although they were useful against normal people, they were nothing in front of this huge army of beasts. This was because they all had a weakness, which was that they moved very slowly. They were not as agile as the army of beasts. When the poisonous beasts were about to bite Bai Yutong and the rest, they all retreated far away. When the poisonous beasts weren't paying attention, they would go up and slap them with their claws without mercy. After a few rounds of fighting, the poisonous beasts were enraged by Bai Yutong and the rest. However, Bai Yutong and the rest were even more excited. They liked it when they were angry but couldn't bite them. Jean Exin and the rest had already ignited the medicinal herbs that Ethereal had given them. When the smell came out, the poisonous beasts that were about to attack them all avoided them. This way, they fell right into the trap that Chu Qingyan had drawn for them. So this was the scene that the one-eyed man saw. Chu Qingyan's people didn't make a move. They just held a bunch of ignited herbs and drove their holy artifacts away. Meanwhile, the wild beasts were killing the holy artifacts in the circle. The one-eyed man's eyes widened. He never thought that their invincible holy artifacts would encounter such a situation. "Are you all dead? Hurry up and save the holy artifacts." Although he didn't know why these people had gathered the holy artifacts together, his instincts told him that it wasn't something good. The one-eyed man didn't care about his status as he roared the order. Chu Qingyan snorted softly, then made a gesture. Ethereal and the rest helped the commoners onto the back of the eagle. Xiao chirped, and its little brothers carried the commoners away. By the time the one-eyed man realized it, it was too late. He couldn't even protect himself. Chapter 1433. Once the citizens were sent away, Chu Qingyan would be able to deal with them in peace. At this moment, the mustached man and the old man heard the commotion and rushed over. Unfortunately, they were too late. The citizens had been moved away and their men were trapped. Moreover, the situation was one-sided. They couldn't understand how they ended up in such a situation in such a short period of time. The poisonous creatures were all gathered together. Without the protection talisman, the Lulan soldiers were like cabbages and radishes, waiting to be harvested by Jean Xian and the rest. The howling cavalry were all experts and were not to be trifled with. Although the mustached man and his men outnumbered them, they couldn't hold up against 10 people. Moreover, they didn't have the holy relic with them, so they were even more flustered. The old man shouted, "Capture the leader first." Chu Qingyan looked at the old man who was pointing at her and realized that he was the leader. At this moment, he knew that he couldn't stabilize the morale of the soldiers and decided to target her. As long as she was captured, her people wouldn't be a problem in their eyes. It seemed that this old man was quite smart. Unfortunately, they underestimated her. The moment the old man finished speaking, the mustached man and his men rushed towards her. Chu Qingyan, on the other hand, slowly drew out the long sword at her waist. The silver sword was bright and clear, tainted with the moonlight, making her look even more holy and pure. Even though she was wearing a dazzling red battle robe, it could not hide the coldness she exuded. Last time when she was fighting with Wu Lin, in order not to hurt anyone, she had held back most of her strength. Now, she could let go and practice. She wanted to see what kind of effect it would have when her skills were combined with the inner force that Dong Ting had passed on to her. She was looking forward to it. The moment someone got close to her, he was killed by her long sword. Chu Qingyan smirked. She flipped her sword and flew towards the mustached man. To capture the leader, capture the leader. She understood this principle. She injected her inner energy into the sword and a sharp sword aura spread out. Those who got close to her were all injured by her sword aura and fell to the ground, vomiting blood. Originally, there were 2 barriers in front of the mustached man, but they were broken by this unknown girl. He was stunned for a moment and quickly blocked the sharp sword with his saber. He was the most famous swordsman in Lulan, but he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to subdue this little girl. In a fight between experts, one would know whether or not they had the skill the moment they made their move. The moment the swords clashed, Chu Qingyan knew that this person was not easy to deal with, but this was exactly what she wanted. She used 60% of her inner force, and her movements became even faster. To an outsider, her sword techniques were dazzling. After 3 or 4 moves, the mustached man was first shocked by her rich inner strength at such a young age, but then he quickly adjusted his state of mind and devoted himself to the fight between the 2. He could not be defeated by this junior, not to mention this was a girl. Su Yi and the others appeared on the left and right of their mistress. They fought the enemy together with her and helped her get rid of the little Luo Luo who had surrounded her. Jin Xen directly faced the one-eyed man. Just now, he had seen him attack, and every move he made was fatal. Many of them were injured. Jin Xen directly took on the task of dealing with him. For a moment, the city was in chaos. No one could tell whether they were allies or enemies. After exchanging no less than 50 moves with the mustached man, Chu Qingyan began to exert her strength. After the mustached man blocked her sword, she used her other palm to attack him. The mustached man couldn't take it. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. The moment the mustached man fell to the ground, someone went forward to catch him. Chu Qingyan withdrew her sword and coldly looked at the astonished mustached man. The mustached man couldn't believe that he had actually lost to this little girl. However, if the mustached man knew that Chu Qingyan hadn't used 70% of her inner strength to deal with him, he would probably die of shame. Chu Qingyan didn't have much to say to this kind of person who disregarded human life. She turned around and looked at the battlefield. Seeing that the mustached man was subdued, the morale of the Lulan army dissipated. Not long after, they all laid down their weapons and surrendered. As for the one-eyed man, he was directly dealt with by Jin Xen. Chu Qingyan nodded inwardly. The one-eyed man's martial arts weren't weak. It seemed that Jin Xen's skills had improved quite a bit. Because she didn't bring many people with her, the task of guarding the place was left to Xiao and the rest. The surrendered Lulan soldiers were surrounded by Shuahua Cake and her little brothers. She walked around and roared from time to time, scaring the Lulan soldiers even more. The poisonous creatures were forced into a corner. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws, but they were afraid of the medicinal herbs in everyone's hands and didn't dare to move forward. Bai Yutong and the rest were eyeing them covetously, occasionally swatting them with their claws. The poisonous creatures didn't dare to act rashly. Xiu walked over and reported, "Master, the people have been sent to a safe place." Chu Qingyan nodded. Everything was going smoothly. At this time, seeing that his people were captured and the sacred objects were also threatened, the mustached man became anxious. "Who are you people? We have no enmity with you. Why are you targeting us?" When he heard this, he knew that the other party didn't recognize them. The mustached man and the others couldn't be blamed for not recognizing them. Even if the Sichuan emperor and the others were here, they wouldn't be able to imagine that these green-faced people were their own people. Moreover, it was obvious that the other party couldn't take it anymore and wanted to negotiate with her. However, after seeing how they treated the people in such a cruel way, how could Chu Qingyan give them the chance? Chu Qingyan ignored him and said to Ethereal, who had returned to her side, "How is it? Are the poisonous creatures all here?" "Not a single one is missing. They've all been forced into a corner." Ethereal didn't dare to delay and immediately replied. Chu Qingyan was very satisfied. "Good, do as we planned." Ethereal also revealed a treacherous smile. With that, Ethereal called for Su Yi and the others to help. The mustached man had a high position in the military and had always been flattered. Now that he saw this person ignoring him, he was filled with anger. Just as he was about to reprimand Chu Qingyan, he realized that the person who had been talking to her just now suddenly took a few bottles and distributed them to the people around him. Those people didn't stop walking toward the sacred objects. He widened his eyes and anxiously questioned Chu Qingyan, "What are you doing to the sacred objects?" When she heard them mention the sacred objects, Chu Qingyan was already filled with disgust. Now that she heard the mustached man mention it again, she snorted coldly. Sacred objects? How can such dirty and ugly things be called sacred objects? Today, I'm going to make them disappear from this world and prevent them from being used by people with bad intentions. I'm going to make sure they can't harm innocent people anymore. You, the mustached man was stunned by her words and was shocked by the cold aura she was exuding. Not far away, Ethereal and the others held the white bottles in their hands and poured a drop onto each of the curled-up poisonous creatures. At first, there was no reaction. Then, the poisonous creatures began to struggle and shriek miserably. However, they were quickly corroded by the drop of medicine and slowly melted into a pool of water. This scene made Xiao Qi, who was used to seeing all kinds of scenes, dumbfounded. It was simply too magical. It was really, as Master said, to make them disappear without leaving anything behind. Chapter 1434. Ethereal's hand that was holding the bottle trembled. Actually, he hadn't thought that the medicine he made would have such an effect. He was both surprised and delighted. At this moment, he couldn't help but look at his little princess consort. The little princess consort had told him to make this medicine. She said that its original name was sulfuric acid. Yesterday, he had listened to her and thought about it for an entire night. Then, he had used the herbs he brought to make it. In order to deal with the Lulan kingdom, his master had asked him to bring all the herbs he had. Also, considering that these poisonous creatures weren't ordinary animals, he had asked his sect to send over some rare herbs. He hadn't thought that it would really come in handy. And the new product that he had developed had such a novel effect. This made a medical fanatic so excited that he couldn't control himself. Chu Qingyan naturally saw the effect. She was also very surprised. According to modern sulfuric acid, it wouldn't be so corrosive. She couldn't help but think of the dissolving water that was described in the book. Perhaps the herbs Ethereal had brought were too strong. Also, the modern prescription was different from the one he had figured out. It was normal for there to be a difference. Moreover, the effect was surprisingly good. She was very satisfied. She had achieved her goal. Ethereal's medicine didn't have a lot of dosage, but there were at least tens of thousands of poisonous creatures on the field. However, Chu Qingyan and he weren't worried about the dosage. This was because the water these poisonous creatures had turned into was corrosive. When they struggled and ran around in pain, the water splashed onto the poisonous creatures next to them. 1 by 1, 10 by 10, and 100 by 100, the poisonous creatures collapsed 1 by 1 and turned into water. The mustached man watched helplessly as the holy objects disappeared before his eyes one after another in such a terrifying manner, which made his hair stand on end. At this moment, Chu Qingyan had the leisure to deal with this person. She looked at him with a smile. Do you know about the cycle of karma in Buddhism? Good will be rewarded with good, and evil will be punished with evil. It's not that there won't be any karma, it's just that the time hasn't come yet. Someone will come to deal with the sins you've committed. The heavens will reincarnate. If you don't believe it, look up and see who will be spared by the heavens. She said this with a smile, but to the mustached man's ears, it was like a death sentence. He couldn't help but look at her warily. Who exactly are you? Who sent you here? Chu Qingyan chuckled. Death is at hand, so there's no harm in telling you. Otherwise, you won't know who you've lost to even after you've gone to the 18th level of hell. She paused and looked into the eyes of the man with the handlebar mustache. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. We are under the banner of the King of England and Xiao Su. The King of England? Once this name came out, there was no need to explain anything. The man with the handlebar mustache was stiffly lifted up. Before he was taken away, he looked at her blankly and muttered, "No wonder, no wonder. Only such a person would be able to raise such an army." Seeing this, Chu Qingyan felt a little proud. Big Ice Cube's name was really famous. As long as his name was mentioned, everyone would know him. As one of his people, she really felt honored to be with him. Seeing that the man with the handlebar mustache was deeply affected, Chu Qingyan didn't say anything more. She just waved her hand and had him taken away. She knew that these poisonous creatures were called sacred by the people of Lulan because they worshipped them blindly. Thus, she wanted them to watch them die in front of their eyes and personally destroy their beliefs. This way, it would be easier to destroy their beliefs than holding them captive. This way, they wouldn't dare to do anything, and it would be easier to subdue her. The man with the handlebar mustache who was taken away woke up with a start. He struggled to turn around and question Chu Qingyan, but the person holding him down didn't give him a chance. With an elbow, he almost cried out in pain. "Let go of me, let go of me. She hasn't told me who she is." He suddenly remembered that when he agreed to cooperate with Nansong, he didn't hear that Xiao Su had such an army by his side. The group of beasts she led was so valiant, so why weren't there any rumors about her in the various countries? In contrast to the man with the handlebar mustache's agitation, one of the people holding him down calmly glanced at him. "That person is our master and also His Royal Highness Princess Consort. However, you don't have the right to know her name." Xiao Su's princess consort? The man with the handlebar mustache was completely stunned. So it was one of that person's people. Xiao Su was already a terrifying existence, but his wife was the same. It seemed that their defeat this time wasn't unjust. The man with the handlebar mustache stopped struggling. It was obvious that he had accepted his fate. Even if he didn't accept his fate, there was nothing he could do. Because on his left and right, there were two leopards eyeing him covetously. Their faint eyes seemed to be telling him that if he dared to move again, they would bite off his neck. "Young princess consort, the poisonous creatures have all been cleaned up." Ethereal cupped his hands and bowed respectfully to the tall and slender person. Today, they once again witnessed the young princess consort's power. At the same time, they were proud of their master who was far away on the horizon. Their master and the young princess consort were a match made in heaven. She was the only one qualified to be their matriarch. Chu Qingyan watched as they sprinkled sand on the corrosive water. The corners of her mouth lifted slightly. "You all did very well. Thank you for your hard work." The Battle of Rao Hezhou was won. When Chu Qingyan defeated the Lulan army stationed at Rao Hezhou, a letter appeared in Xiao Su's hand. His dark eyes didn't reveal any emotions. After he finished reading the letter, he casually put it aside and said indifferently, "This Prince of Nansong is indeed smart." "Master, what did the other party say in the letter?" Turin asked in confusion. Someone had used an arrow to shoot this letter in the dark of the night. When he saw his master's name written on the letter, he had immediately sent it over. Xiao Su's voice was indifferent and monotonous. "Pang Huang wants to cooperate with this prince and asked to meet this prince tomorrow night." Hearing this, Turin couldn't help but frown. "This Prince of Nansong is too daring. He dares to ask you to meet at this time and want you to cooperate with him. That's too whimsical." Xiao Su shook his head. "This person is good at reading people's minds. He dared to send this letter after careful consideration. He knows what happened between Ben Wang and the imperial family. He knows that Ben Wang is dissatisfied with the imperial family, so he proposed this." After his master said this, Turin felt that it was very reasonable. Last month, they were still fighting to the death with the Sichuan army. Now, it was only because of the common people that their master was willing to cooperate. They didn't have any feelings left with the imperial family. If this Pang Huang's proposal was put to someone else, they might have agreed. The earth spirit thought for a while and asked, "Then will master agree?" Ben Wang is still clear about family affairs and state affairs. I never mix them up. But this appointment, Xiao Su hooked his lips coldly, Ben Wang still has to go. How can one catch a tiger cub without entering the tiger's den? Turin smiled when he heard this. This was their master. He could keep his heart at any time. In another place, Xiao Ran received the news and immediately stood up from his chair. You said that Pang Huang sent someone to send a letter to eldest brother? This little one saw it with my own eyes. It's absolutely true. The Imperial Guard immediately said. Xiao Ran's body swayed and fell back into the chair. He muttered, Imperial brother, are you really going to betray the country for glory? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.